Hello and welcome to the BNB show, the miraculous return. Like a phoenix that died off into its ashes last year, we raised back up into the sky, flying even higher. Brendon is my man. Seahawks Brendon comes back into the house on my side of it. I know he's streaming over on his end, so welcome out to the Brendon Nelson crew out there as well. But Brendon, welcome back here to the Hawks Nest. It is really nice to be able to kick off another year with you, man. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm like D. Eskridge. You can't get rid of me.
I can't. You're a little bit more healthier. You're a little more game day ready. I can rely a little bit more on you with that one.
Yeah,
but
I don't drop passes like he does.
It's true. The route running's I think a little bit better. I think you can run some probably crispy routes too versus the other. So there's a little bit of that. But it's great to have you in the house. We've got so much to talk about today. We haven't had a chance to chop it up here for a couple of months, folks. So we've got some ground to cover, both, in what's been happening in recent history. And then also we're going to be previewing up a little bit of this exhibition contest with the Los Angeles Chargers and try to see what we're going to try to get out of this game, what to look for in this game, just as we all try to kind of understand this whole team a little bit better, both offense and defensively. But I guess just to start us off, I know we've got kind of a guiding things we want to kind of go through here, Brendon, but in just general terms from your standpoint, how has the last couple months been from, how you've taken in the ups and downs and the news? There's not been a lot, admittedly speaking. It's been pretty quiet, but we've gotten some things coming down. I know we'll go through individually, so you don't have to go, micro on this, but just on more of the bigger picture here, what has been your kind of thoughts on the team with Macdonald coming in?
I mean, generally speaking, when it's the off season, quiet is good. If it's loud, it probably means something's bad. Like you're the Cowboys and you've got your three best players all wanting new contracts and you don't want to pay them and they don't really want to play, it's stuff like that. So you want quiet. Quiet is good. Quiet's a positive thing. So I've mostly been pretty happy with everything that I've heard. I think that since this offseason started, pretty much everything they've done has been something I've been pretty on board with. I could maybe nitpick here and there a little bit, but I think this team is on the right track. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to end up exactly where we want to end up, but I think this train is moving in the right direction. And that's even continued on into some of the stuff that's happened in the last couple months that's happened after our most recent show before this one. So the little bit that we've gotten, I've mostly been on board with. So yeah, I'm very happy.
Would you say that my general perception and feeling here is that, and haven't gotten to the games, I understand all this, but you can get a feel for these things kind of as we do sort of have our pulse always on the button here with this. Have you got a general feeling that, he's been very seamless in onboarding what he wants to get done here? He is accomplishing the work that for some they might wonder and say this will take him a full year to get all this in here. I'm not saying this means we're going to jumpstart or go super fast, but just that on a timely manner, he's not running into hiccups or things by any measure that we're seeing or hearing from the players and their lack of being able to understand the scheme. Anything we're hearing about them fluidly, seamlessly adhering to it. You getting the same feeling then too on top of that?
Yeah, I think he's doing pretty much everything right. I don't think he could be doing much better. Now, you are bringing in not only a brand new defense, but a pretty complex defense, right? This is not just play cover 3 99% of the snaps. This is, they're talking about how Leonard Williams is going to play 6 different positions this year. They're talking about how Draymond Jones is going to be moved all over the place. They're talking about sending a lot of pressure from the secondary. These are things that are intrinsically going to be complicated to pick up. But I think that the juice is going to be worth the squeeze. And I think that for what it is, it's on the right path. I think that we're going to figure this out. It might not happen immediately. It might not happen day one, but if it was worth doing, it would be, if it wasn't worth doing, it would be easy. Right.
Yeah. Everybody be able to do it and do it just as well. In addition to that, well, what are some of the items that have popped up on your radar over these last month or two that is of notable story? Like you, I echo just that it is what you want to have, which is calm waters, nothing happening, no off the field stuff, just completely no major injuries. He was out training and he blew this out, something like that. We've all seen those stories come out around this time. What from a story of just kind of some of the items we haven't had a chance to really discuss that have come down the tracks that stood out here to you with that?
Right. So if I'm going to talk about, I'd say basically 4 significant things have happened over the last couple months that I kind of want to see how you're feeling about it. Like, there's been other little things too. Like, we sign a guy from the UFL. I'm not going to really talk about that. We don't know. He's not going to make the team anyway, realistically. So I'm not talking about that. First thing that happened, and this actually is a couple months old now. Before our last show, we discussed many times that the Seahawks needed to create a little more money. They needed more cap space. They were going to have to do something, because if you did the math on the rookie deals and the practice squad, we needed more money. And we theorized where that money could come from. It could be an extension. It could be a cut. What they decided to do was restructure the contract of Draymond Jones to free up about $7.5 million, which lowers his cap hit significantly for this year at the expense of making him much harder to cut, or much more painful to cut next year. What do you think of that decision?
Well, you can directly see the inroads of what it creates for you. I mean, I don't think you can deny, Brendan, can you, that in this deal, when looking at it, if you see connectively what it leads to, you can't just say this is happening in a vacuum. You can say, I can see the connection to a Connor Williams occur, the signing of a Connor Williams occur, because you got this money freed up. It is something that needed to happen one way or the other. So you were going to need to free this money up. You and I agreed on that part. There were only so many people that you had left to free up money from. The well had been tapped through for most of it. And I don't think you wanted to go to a guy like DK that still had 2 years remaining on his deal and about $22 million of bonus money that still had to be wound off those 2 years in that deal. So this really did lead John, I think, down a little bit of a line of where he had to go very directly to kind of the door A or door B on this one to get a restructure done. And was this the ideal? No, it was not. I also think this is a bit of the perception versus reality. Perception of Draymond Jones by the average Seahawks fan to a degree is going to be, oh, he had a disappointing free agent year last year. Oh, he didn't meet to the contract that he signed with us. When in actuality, the Seattle Seahawks kind of in a lot of ways sabotaged a lot of that potential production there, not only by having the simplistic defense that was a far cry from really what he was coming from there with Denver, but then also the transition outside as a power edge and run down defender, taking away that many more snaps from the inside. And not only that, last point, future of this is that he has said he's going to play 50-50 inside and outside, which is great. The team's going to find a usefulness for him that fits to Mike Macdonald's scheme well and what he wants to have as far as the big power edges. But that's also not why you signed the guy. So my point on this being, Brendan, is that he has been a good soldier on this. The team is not going to penalize him for being a good soldier. And the average fan may look at this as a disappointing contract, but that's to me the bit of the difference of the perception versus reality on this one.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm definitely keeping an open mind when it comes to Draymond Jones this year, because I think that situationally it's tough. And this goes for a lot of players on the Seahawks defense over the last couple of years, where there may have been some things going on out of their control that caused them to look not as good as they could be. Because, I mean, not only did you have just generally kind of the end days of Pete Carroll's defense, but you also had probably the least compelling defensive coordinator this team has had in the Pete Carroll era in Clint Hurd, where, I mean, there's nothing there, right? There's stuff with... They're flawed, but you saw it with guys like even Ken Norton Jr., Chris Richard, Gus Bradley. There was something there. They could do some stuff that actually worked. Clint Hurd just never could figure out anything that worked. And I don't want to throw blame at Draymond Jones for the shortcomings up there, because the stuff that happens up there is always going to have a much bigger effect than anything that just happens at the player level. So... yeah. I'm not against that. I will say I was thinking that Draymond probably would not be here next year. Now, we could still release him, but it would just cost a lot more money than it would have previously. So I'm okay with it. I will say that if I had the choice between a Draymond Jones contract restructure or, say, a Geno Smith extension, I'd probably rather do the Geno extension. But I can also understand why maybe they wanted to see what Geno was going to do in this new offense before they commit.
It's true enough. And technically speaking, you have the 2 years left on the deal with Geno. I think they would prefer to try to let that bonus money wind out, let themselves get to next year, where you and I are both looking at that, where yes, the cap is a little bit tight, But even with this Draymond Jones situation, if we went contract by contract a little bit through things, I think we would come to find that there is still some flexibility for them to make some things and make some moves and to get out from under some deals and to create a little bit more space at that time. They're not going to be able to go hog wild in free agency next year. That's no doubt about that. And this certainly move ensures that that's not going to happen. But that's also okay because maybe the team's not going to necessarily need to do that by that point. The team will be good enough, developed enough, the young kids coming along, that now you can just say, hey, we can roll kind of with what I got, trust our natural process here because we've done enough to kind of soup this up to get it to the proper place.
Right. So I'm okay with it. I think there were one or two things that would have been a little bit preferable. Like you could have saved $3 million by letting Daryl Taylor go. Could have saved $3 million or at least $2 million by redoing John Radigan. But you probably needed a bigger chunk of change than that, especially with the move that the team has made in the last couple of days. Like that was not going to get solved with just a couple $1 million. You needed the, I think, $7.5 million this freed up.
You really did. And that's this move. Like I say, I don't think you can ignore that fact of it because you're in the position to give him this money. You're giving him other teams are not willing to give for the injury situation he has. You know, was there a team out there willing to give a 1 year, $4 million deal to him? I know it's a 3, but there's the 3 extra. So let's call it the 1 year, 6 he can earn up to. Was there another team in the NFL at this point in time with their cap situation able to preside in that? Probably not as many teams, not in need of a center at least. So this is part of that. You got to me, connect it one to the other, and you were able to substantially upgrade your center position by making this restructure happen. And I think Draymond Jones is going to be a good player in this defense, but I do think he's going to be doing a little bit of the hard hat thing here, Brendon. It's not going to be the sexy inside accumulating a ton of sacks. It's going to be a lot of, I'll get some 50-50 time on the inside, and then the other 50-50 time, I'm going to be the power edge Red Bryant kind of role. You know, I mean, that's not a sizzling, like you're going to be able to do a lot of cool things in that role. A lot of times you're setting the edge and you're hunkering down, and it's good. You need it in a defense. You need it to stop the run. Don't get me wrong, Brendon, but it will also make him look a little worse than he actually is.
Yeah. At the end of this year, we are probably going to say he's a little overpaid, but only a little overpaid, right? It's not going to be like, oh, massive overpaid. This is what sinks franchises. It's going to be like, I wish that was a little bit less, but it's not the end of the world. Like we don't have to make it that big of a deal. You know, the real killer, the real killers would be like paying top of the market deals to guys who aren't that good. That's the killer. Paying Draymond Jones 20% more than he's worth is acceptable.
Agreed. Totally. And I do think the 2026 cap situation helps the 25 out too, if that makes sense, because it is so freed up in 26 that they'll be able to massage the numbers off 25 if they have to into 26 to make that go.
Yeah. And it is worth noting, part of the restructure was they added a void year to the end of Draymond's deal. So they know how to do it. We haven't seen that in a while, but they know how to do it. So
let's go void years.
Yeah. And again, like next year, if they're in trouble, they can just do that again. And I know it's not amazing because you're kicking the can down the road, but there's always a way to make it work with the salary cap. You might not like it. It might not be fun, but you can do it.
And they've got a role that they feel good about in this defense for him with that, Brendon. You know, they don't do this restructure if they're going, this is a bad free agent signing for us. This is a guy that didn't quite fit. We were hoping he was going to be this. It's not that. He's coming to a new defense that's not really going to ask him to do the same things he was doing before. Let's just go ahead, like you say, let's work to get out from under this deal. Let's not re-hunker ourselves back down into it. But it's a representation of the team liking his work ethic, liking what he brings to the field, that they did this as well.
Mm-hmm. All right, so that kind of segues us right into this second big move. And this was something that started weeks ago because we met with him, had a physical with him a few weeks ago. Then he left town. Then he came back into town. Then Drew Rosenhaus came into town. We started negotiating. And a couple days ago, they punched it in. They made it happen. Connor Williams is a Seahawk, 1 year, $6 million. It's hard to make a move in August that gets you excited, but this one got me. This one got me excited all day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm glad to hear it. So you were unequivocally stoked on this, as it does seem like many are, but I want to make sure with you never know for sure where you might stand on these. This one definitely, from your standpoint, struck as one that was absolutely double-decker home run kind of move to make.
I don't know what the downside is. Like, I guess people are a little scared about the injury stuff because he did have a pretty significant injury last year, missed half the season. Honestly, though, the previous 3 years he played in every single game. So I don't know how worried we should be about that. And like, sometimes there's risk involved, right? If he wasn't injury prone, you wouldn't have been able to get him because he would have cost way more money. If he wasn't coming off this major injury, he probably would have signed back in March for like 3 years, 35 million or something.
Maybe
this is why you can get him. Yeah, maybe more. Yeah, you're right. So it's clearly the best center you've had since Max Unger. I feel like he might be a little bit better than that. Like, he's been extremely good the last 4 years. And half that time has been spent at left guard, but he's been really good in both spots. So if we end up needing to break glass in case of emergency at left guard, he can bump over. For now, he's going to be taking the center spot. And I mean, we've been dealing with like bottom of the league play at center for, I want to say, at least 2 years. And we haven't had a good center in about a decade. And it really feels like, and people kind of get a little irritated whenever I say anything to kind of throw a little bit of shade at Carroll, but under Pete Carroll, I feel like if this exact same thing happened when Carroll was here, they would have just talked about it for a couple weeks and then he would have signed somewhere else. And then it would have been like, okay, we're fine with what we have. And then the season starts and we find out we're not fine with what we have. And we actually got him. We actually got the guy. And I think it's about as good as an August signing is going to get.
It really is. And not to mention, on top of how good you talk about him playing, he's also a really, really, really great fit for the scheme you run offensively. You want a center to do this and do that, and he can do all the mobility things that you're wanting to require from the system on top of being good, which just to me only adds, as you say, to the point of this is a non-downside move. There is only upside. There's only good to be gone. You might be right on the Carroll thing. This is a team that historically, when Carroll was here, kind of set the offensive line and sort of, hit it and quit it and moved on and did other parts of the team that they would look to upgrade and take care of. And certainly when it came to the center position, Brendan, this has been not only one, like you say, it's been 10 years since we've had good play there, but I mean, what was it? Christian Sokoli and Drew Nowak. And we got some of the other names in here. Little Joey Hunt. Joey Hunt.
Kyle Fuller was probably the worst of them all.
Kyle Fuller. It's been brutal. And this guy brings certainty, scheme fit, cheap, even at the $6 million price. That's still not, and it's a good thing. If he's at $6 million, means he's played the whole season and he's balling. Fantastic. Well worth. If I get top 5 center play for $6 million, call me, sign me up for that. And then the final part of this, Brendan, you get to next offseason. You like what he plays, you sign him to a contract extension, you're set. You don't sign him to a contract extension, you're tight on cap. He goes out and signs that 4-year, $50 million deal. Now you get a compensatory pick back for him.
Right. And I do suspect that's what's going to happen. I don't think we're going to be able to afford him because he's really good. And the only reason why he didn't get that deal this year was the injury. I think he even said back in March, I'm not going to really be looking to sign until I'm back from my injury. So that's why he stayed on the market at all. So yeah, I'm pumped about this one. And, it is too bad about Oluwatimi, but we'll talk a little bit more about this later. I think the reports from training camp were not super encouraging on Oluwatimi. And sometimes you just have to, let the faith go a little bit. You have to be like, okay, this doesn't seem like it's going to work out. Let's go a different direction.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the Sato Lamé thing where people are kind of lamenting a little bit the potential that we lose him if we try to sneak him onto the practice squad because of the numbers game and the way that's stacked up. And Oluwatimi is a guy that started a lot of games in college, so he wasn't coming out like Anthony Bradford was, where he's raw and you got to give him some time to really develop. What he is what he should be. And if the coaches aren't seeing him there at that place of being a guy ready to ascend to start at this point, it's not as easy to believe that he's going to need just another year or two and get there. I think somebody told me he's like only 2 years younger than Connor Williams or something. So there's not this big, long time for him to kind of get there and go. He also seems to be getting kind of nicked up a lot. There's always seems to be something he's kind of dealing with on that side. And so it's, he's a 5th round guy. It's just like I mentioned, Sato is a 6th round guy. These kind of picks, these kind of places in the draft are not places that when we look at and evaluate every offseason, we don't look to the 5th round going, oh, there's a sure starter you're going to get at that spot. It's a bit of more of a flip the coin and, you hope it come up the right way.
Right, right. And you got to take these gambles sometimes, especially when it's reasonably priced. 1 year, $6 million for this guy is nothing. The way he's played the last 4 years, he's worth double that.
I went through and looked. He's obviously a top 5 PFF center guy, which some people give that metric. Some people don't, Brendan. I think it's interesting when you look at the top 5 rated centers from PFF last year, and then you go look at the top 5 paid centers in the NFL this upcoming year, that you can find a direct relation between them.
Mm-hmm.
And so him making it $6 million versus Eric McCoy out there and what he's making. Creed Humphreys is about to sign a market setting deal, who was actually behind Connor on that PF, just barely behind him on that top 5 list. So yeah, you're right. You're getting this for like a quarter of the price of the going rate, and on a 1-year deal at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah, that's a plus move. And again, it's August. You're not supposed to be able to make a splash like that in August. You had a rare opportunity to, and you made it happen. Like, I was waiting for another team to sneak in there and take him away. Ravens showed up at the 11th hour, and I was like, okay, here it is. And we didn't let it happen.
You can always count on Drew Rosenhaus to do his Jerry Maguire bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's always going to do his Jerry Maguire bit. Like, we're going to Baltimore. They're really interested over here. I mean, they're really interested. And John's over there like, I know their cap situation is. They don't got any money. What are you talking about? No, I mean, we're going to go there though, John, and he's got this guy's as healthy as any player I have ever seen in my life, doing his whole spiel. And it's the most miraculous recovery from an ACL I have ever seen. And he's always doing his stick. Hey, props to him. He's got to, do what he does for his clients, but he does fit to that, type. And I was right with you. I thought the second this thing lasted too long, those things usually have kind of a beat to them, right? Guy comes in, guys gets the physical done. You've already kind of agreed on the framework or the parameters of a deal. And then the deal gets done a day or two later, instead of this kind of was like a week out. You're going, okay, this is maybe going to take a bit of time.
Right. And we don't know exactly how the contract shakes out. There might be some incentives in there depending on playing time. So if the worst does happen, it might be less than the $6 million. We might be able to find a way to offset losing him in the middle of the season if that does happen. So it's a win all around. I don't think there's any downside here. Even if he gets hurt, I wouldn't really call that downside if he's only going to cost that.
No, $3 million flyer, and you save that money, like you say. It's an insurance policy that you rarely get on these players. So you get them a quarter of the cost. You have an insurance policy, no long-term risk on him as far as contractually speaking with that ACL. And that was something people told me in my chat initially, Brendan, was, we should have done a contract extension. And I go, well, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The guy's coming off a torn ACL. I don't want to be giving a guy coming off a torn ACL a contract extension. That reeks of like how you look back on that going, man, that was kind of like, with the Russ move, like, they gave him a contract before he even played a game. Let's get out there and try him out. I'd rather for the price on this, it's worth it for the flyer price on this. On top of, like you just said, he might not even want to sign the $3 or $30 million deal, because he looks at it like, hey, next offseason I get the $455.
Yeah, I would be very surprised if he wanted to sign multi-year. Like, maybe he could have gotten 3 for $20 because he got 1 for $6. Let's say he gets 3 for $20. Why would you do that if you can just go play one good season and you're going to get 4 for $50, 4 for $55?
That's right. Especially in this offense, which he gets to come into. So that fits him purely from his physical ability, and has a lot of talent there that should allow him to really potentially sign within that. A couple donations here. Memberships, got a new member, Ski Nation. I can never tell if it's on your side or my side when we get new members on that. So thank you, Ski Nation, whether it's on me or Brendan's side. Really appreciate it for you joining up as a member. Ryan B has also become a member of the channel. Thank you, Ryan B. Love the emoji there. It goes hard. It goes hard. Welcome aboard. Board Skyler with a $5 donation. Thank you for board, Skyler. Says Hawks are going to ruin the Broncos week 1. Peyton has shown no flashes, draft or otherwise. Young quarterbacks versus our complex D is going to be hard to face.
Yeah, I mean, did you see that Bo Nix is third on the depth chart?
I did. Yeah, it's kind of funny.
It is worth noting that every rookie was at the bottom of the depth chart. It's probably some Sean Payton thing where, like, you got to earn it. You got to earn it in the preseason. Yeah, I'd be shocked if it's not Bo Nix starting for whatever it's worth.
I would too, because I just think from the Broncos standpoint, Jared Stidham's not going to take you to the playoffs in the AFC. Jared Stidham's certainly not going to take you to conference championships or Super Bowls. You are having to kind of suffer your penance a little bit for the Wilson deal with the money and where that team is at, frankly, from a talent standpoint. Why wouldn't you as a coach at that point just go, he's got a line. The thing that he can say, Brendan, is you point out last year with Wilson on this, that line pass protected well. So he's not throwing the typical young rookie into the fire to get him beat in because his line sucks. He can go out there and suffer the things he's got to kind of suffer through and figure it out. And that helps to probably speed up his process of development for Peyton into that future when they truly can compete. So I'm with you. I don't understand. I don't think that that's going to be the way that this maintains. And I think it's going to be a long day. We're playing this game at home. You don't want to be in Denver in September because you can't breathe out there. Mm-hmm. It's too hard. It's too hot. And you just can't breathe. It's too much with that altitude already up bad. So we get them at home. We get him with probably I would expect Knicks, and not hearing anything great coming out of Broncos camp. Like they're all firing together, and the plan. You're feeling the plan come together. You're feeling Peyton's vision being implemented.
Yeah, I mean, I think they'll do all right. I think he'll be all right. But again, it's the first game that he's ever going to play in the NFL. He's playing on the road. I don't think that defense has gotten appreciably better, so I'm feeling pretty good about it. We'll talk about that a lot in a couple of weeks here for sure.
Absolutely. But we're both feeling good about that one too as the opening match, and kind of the NFL schedule makers to potentially give us two rookie or not the greatest of backups necessarily as our first two games that we get to play out the box to start the season with a new coach. They kind of did a bit of a minor solid on that one, I think. Just a little bit.
It's not bad. Yeah.
A little bit. Thank you though, Skylar. I appreciate the $5 donation, and Seahawks OG with a $5 dono as well. Says, if a complex new defense wasn't worth it, we'd have kept Pete's D. Go Hawks.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, when you implement the complex D, it still has to be good. Like I remember in 2021, the Seahawks tried to add a lot of wrinkles to their defense, and the players just couldn't pick it up, and results were bad for the first, I'd say, half of the season, basically. And then things got a little bit better, but it was one of those things where the players just weren't quite picking up. I remember Trey Flowers was talking about how he was having a really hard time understanding what he was supposed to do in the new defense, and players just out of place a lot. So it's got to work, but I mean, they're doing it the right way, right? They're spending the whole offseason on it. The only thing I really have concern about is that our inside linebackers are missing a lot of time, and they're probably a very important cog of this defense. So I don't love that, but it'll be worth it.
I think it is a very important cog of the defense. I mean, they even drafted that kid out of Clemson as an inside linebacker a year out to eventually potentially replace Roquan, or not Patrick Queen, if he left in free agency. And that's on top of having the first round pick invested in him, and the draft capital they gave up for Roquan, and the money they paid for Roquan. So it is you could make a lot of, I think, arguments. It's one of the more important positions in this defense versus other defenses and how they view their linebackers, Brendan. So that is a bit of a worry. It does seem like in having a couple different stops where he's had to implement this defense, that's where you do feel like he's been aided in that, in the way he talks about it and how he feels fairly confident in what he's getting across here. There was a lot of mistakes being made. There were a lot of problems that were going down. If there was a lot of miscommunication that was afoot, you'd maybe hear a little more frustration from him of there are bumps in the road here, because he's been pretty straightforward with what he's seeing, I think. And I don't think he's just kind of doing everything's soft, everything's wonderful, everything's beautiful, everything's great. I think he's trying to give you kind of the real scoop with it. But you're right. This is you're going for a cutting edge defense. That's what we're doing. We've gone from archaic and 1988 style defense to now the new. You mentioned why the prior didn't work, Brendan, is because you can't take an archaic 1988 style defense and throw modern principles on top of it and hope that cleans it up. It still is at the base what it is at the root. This is something completely different, and this is, I think, going to really be beneficial. But like you say, got to give it a little bit of time, because this might take us a few games to figure it out through this season. Might take through that first half of the schedule. Might take through the first season. We don't really quite know yet, but it will be worth it in the long run. Seahawks OG, you are right about that.
Right.
Thank you for the donation. Appreciate you. Very kind of guys. So we are both on board with this Connor Williams thing. The moon. Has it done for you what it's done for me, which is raise this team's outlook by a game?
I think so, because the big concern had to be the interior, the offensive line in general, let's say. But, you look at training camp so far, we've heard really good things about Charles Cross. The reports have been rave. It's been getting a lot of positive attention over there. And now you're adding a relatively blue chip center. and you've got some stuff that's going to happen at guard. We don't totally know how that's going to shake out yet, but you've got whatever's going to happen at right tackle. I'm not sure, but we are better equipped to handle disaster at right tackle this year than we were last year, if it does come that way. And we'll talk about Abe Lucas in a second here, but like that takes your offensive line up significantly just by his presence. Like center's an important position. That's an important part of it. You know, the communication with the quarterback, the ability to get the snap off and then get up and start blocking, all the stuff you do helping the guards double team. Like it has to be a big factor here. So I feel like it does make the team better by a game. I don't know which game exactly, but I feel like it does make them better.
Yeah. It's hard to pinpoint which one it would be, but it is just to me, if I have them at, I think I was going to end up settling, and we'll be doing, I'm sure, a preview show as we get closer to the season on this, on record predictions and all that. But, you know, if I had them at 10 wins before, I have them 11. If I had 9, I'm up to 10. I think that it does take it at least up that, with even some possibility of taking it beyond that, because you took what was going to be your weak link on this offensive line. I don't know if Laken Thomas can play good, but I don't think he would have been your weak link. I think the right guard had too much talent at it to be your weak link. And like you said, we've reinforced the depth with the right tackle, where even if Lucas didn't play, that wasn't going to be it. But we have seen, as you mentioned, the last 2 years in Austin Blythe and Evan Brown, overall piss poor results from the interior of that center position. It's been bad. They have plays that get blown up. They don't move well in space. Even in Blythe, who was supposed to be a mobile based guy, and that was supposed to be a little bit at the forefront of his game, I didn't think it was as much there. And this is now where you get a guy that can do that stuff. And in Grubb's offense, especially, Brendan, because you think that center a lot of times, unless you're going up against a lot of these 3-4 defenses, which we're not seeing many of the pure 3-4 anymore, where you got the nose tackle right over the center, right? Mm-hmm. It's all defensive tackle here, defensive tackle here. And so you have that center oftentimes uncovered, where he doesn't have to worry about necessarily a guy coming at penetration right through his direction that he'd have to deal with if he was in front of his face, is what I'm trying to say. What I mean by that is that Grubb spreads everybody out, and now he starts to do that pull center stuff with him, because he can take advantage of him being kind of unblocked or unguarded off the rip there a little bit. And he does that stuff so well on tape, and that fits to this offense, part of that scheme fit stuff. So I think it's going to be, I think you're going to feel the measurable impact of this guy as long as he is healthy.
Right. So yeah, love it. Love it. It's the kind of thing that I had been thinking about for a while, and then the team actually went out and did it. It's one of those, it's like when we drafted Reek Woolen. I've been thinking about Reek Woolen. I'd studied him. I'd looked at him, and I'm like, I really like this guy, but what are the odds we get him? And then we got him. Connor Williams, same thing.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's one of those ones where you dream. We do the whole hot stove league thing where we all look at guys. We're like, man, I like to do this, you know, and it's part of where you get to the point, Brendan, why you support the moves. Last year, even with the, to me, the big cat and going out there and getting Leonard Williams. I looked at him as a guy that we should look to target, because it was a position of scarcity out there in the open market to find these quality defensive tackles, and you had a market opportunity to grab them. And John jumped. So it's easy to support these moves when you can see the intelligence behind them, even leading up to the moves being made, where they're not shocker deals, where you're kind of for long looking in the distance at him. And I know there's even, Niner content creator guys that have been looking at Connor Williams as well, like, man, we got to get this line. He'd be the great, that they're mad today that we got him. There's Niner fans going, man, why doesn't our team? We're now like the roles have been flipped here, Brendan. They're the ones that are going like, why doesn't our team invest in the offensive line? And our team's the team investing in the offensive line. And it's a beautiful.
Well, I mean, they did invest in it. They just gave a 4-year deal to Jake Brendel, and now wish they could take it back. And
there is that. I guess they tossed a 3rd rounder for Pooney in there, so you got a little bit of that in there too. But it's one that is something you hear from the Niner fans very, very clearly, is why don't we put more into this offensive line? Why is it sort of kind of being neglected over the past couple of years?
They have a lot of cap space. I was looking at it. They got like $50 million. They could have done it if they wanted to, but I guess they know what's coming with these contracts up next year, right?
It's a little bit to me like I think you got to, when you look at these cap things, this is my new, I'll see what you think on this, but I think when you look at the cap situations now, you always got to look at it almost in a 2-year front situation, like what's happening in the immediacy and then what's happening in the next year, especially when there's such a big discrepancy into the next season, where they've got $39 million of dead money on the books for next year. And so you can see they're telegraphing here with what they want to do, which is to roll the money over so that they can get their cap cleared down to a 0 position. I think they got like 40 free agents as well, in addition to that next year due as well. So yeah, and then you got Brock Purdy's contract on top of it. And that's a hell of a kind of acme weight holding over the top of all of that I just spoke about just there, that I think that that's where they can't just look at like, this money's just ours to burn this year, and then we'll just deal with next year. They're kind of stuck, man. That's why they're making this Ayuk move. There was not enough money to do Ayuk, Trent Williams extension, and get Brock Purdy done next year. That's too much.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So the last big move of the offseason since our last show was an extension. We did extend a player, not really so much to create cap space. I think it created like $1.5 million. But I think it's just because we like the player and we want to go ahead and lock him up now rather than paying more later. Julian Love. So Julian Love was in the last year of his deal, gave him an extension that amounts to basically 3 years, $33 million, some escalators depending on interceptions and Pro Bowl nods to get it up to 36. So how did you feel about the Julian Love deal?
Love it from start to finish. It is a deal that is a representation of a deal. Why you always have to on these deals. I know it's our business to where we've got to react to these things really fast, and people want the opinion on things, but sometimes they want opinions early before we know all of the information, and that you have to look at these deals and the numbers, because the first numbers that always comes out are the agent's numbers. Those are Jerry Maguire numbers. Those are souped up fake numbers in a lot of respects. Not fake in that they're not accurate, but not really a representation of the way the contract will play out. The first 2 years of the deal are $6 million. You freed up money this year, which is nice to do. And even as a small bit, it helps. It certainly is going to help. Mm-hmm. And then you get them for the next 2 years on $6 million a piece, basically. And then the deal goes up to like $13 million into year 3. But then you can also get out from under the deal after year 3 if you wanted to at that time. So there's not that big risk of it really becoming an albatross type contract. And like you said, another guy that fits to this defense. This is not just some guy that they inherited that they kind of like. This is a guy that, as much as any guys on this defense, like a Devin Witherspoon, purely fit to what this scheme wants them to do. He has a background at free, strong safety, slot. He's even has snaps with the Giants and playing outside corner for them. And that's his background going back to, I believe, Notre Dame. So he does a lot of different things. And he played actually really good football for us last year as the year went along. Love the signing. How about you?
Yeah. He's another guy who I think suffered because of the general fundamental flaws with the defense last year, where the pass rush wasn't there as much as we needed it, where some of the coverage things were not being called the way they needed to be called. The Clint Hurtt stuff, the Pete Carroll stuff, because, I pointed this out and others have pointed it out. Nobody gave up more passing yards on PFR last year than Julian Love. He was getting abused in coverage. And I keep telling people, some of that probably had to do with the situation he was in more so than anything he's necessarily doing wrong as a player. And I think that the coaching staff saw him in the early stages of camp and they were kind of seeing the same things that I was thinking. And they decided, let's take care of this now, because Antoine Winfield Jr. is going to sign some unholy contract in the next 365 days, and safety contracts are going to go way up. And if Julian Love has another good year, this 3-year $36 million deal would probably be more like 3 years $45 million if he plays well. And like you said, he's not going to see most of that money. The next 2 years are really cheap, and then there are 2 expensive years, but the first expensive year isn't that bad, and then by the second year you're going to be able to get out of it almost painlessly. So about, I'd say 40% of that money is in a year that he's never going to get to. So you have to look at the contract through that lens. And he did some really good things last year too. He, he had that Philly game where he was basically the player of the game. He basically won the game for us. He did other good things as well. And he was being put in some rough situations. And the thing that strikes you about Julian Love is the versatility. When he was on the Giants under Martindale, he was playing strong safety, free safety, slot corner, a little bit of outside corner. He was all over the place. So that's something that's Macdonald looks at and probably really gets excited about.
He really does. I think it's the forefront of skill sets he wants in all players: inside, defensive line, outside, corner, safety. Give me guys that can do a lot of things and do it naturally. Not that I force them to do it or I have to train them to do it, but they have it in their skill set to do it. And Julian Love does so. At $6 million a year, that's a far cry from the Quandre Diggs type contracts, or certainly the Jamal Adams quantitative deal that we gave out to him. So it's just in a whole different territory. And you're right, they got maybe out ahead of this as well as where the cost would have gone, because let's also keep in mind here, Brendon, that if you don't sign this deal, you get into next offseason. We don't know what we're going to get with Rayshawn Jenkins for sure. That's basically a 1-year deal we have him on. I know it's a 2-year deal, but it's a 1-year deal. And if it goes bad, you get out from under that. But then you're looking for 2 safeties in one offseason. An offseason where at that time you're really looking to put the pedal down if you've not become a contender by this season, and truly then I'm sure become a contender by that point.
Right. I agree with that. I am down with that. I think that you want to. I mean, Macdonald likes his safeties, right? I mean, look at all the investment they made at safety over in Baltimore. So obviously we're not going to invest in safeties the way we did the last few years of Carroll. But I mean, this is a cheaper deal than either of the big safety deals we had before, and it's 2024. It's a very different circumstance from what we did with Adams or Diggs a couple years ago. So I'm pretty on board with it. This is definitely going to be an interesting year for Julian Love, because there were some things that I thought he didn't do great at last year. He's going to have to prove that it had more to do with his circumstances than anything intrinsic with him. And I think that he will. Like, you look at his years with New York, he didn't have those problems. So it feels like something intrinsic to Seattle last season.
Well, and he went to a lot different defense in Seattle than what he was doing in New York. So to your point on that, he was doing a lot different responsibilities, or at least slightly different responsibilities than what he was doing before. And, you know, when it comes to Jamal and Quandre, part of the problem you have with paying him that money is you're paying him that money, Brendon, and they're doing very specific, select things on the football field. Rather than they do all of this, it's kind of like they do this part of the pie here. You know, Quandre's single high deep. You know, Jamal's going to blitz for you, you know, but he can't do this, but he can't do that. This is a guy that can kind of give you a little bit of everything. And so you can use him in a defense that also then tells their safeties, hey, I'm going to leave you in man coverage. I'm going to leave you out there single high times. I'm going to leave you to drive out as an outside corner post snap so that we can confuse the offense. This is the stuff that he does really well, and it fits right in his back pocket.
Yeah, I'm down for it. I'm ready for it. So congratulations, Julian Love. He got the bag.
Let's go, Julian. And Seahawks can feel a bit easier about next offseason if they do have to go and look at that other position, the safety position, and address it. So, Isaac, let me get to Yellen's here first. A little behind. Thank you, Yellen, for the $2 donation. I appreciate you for that. It says BNB went 6 to midnight after the Williams signing. You better believe it.
Yeah, I saw that. I was there for a little bit of it. But yeah, I mean that's a August surprise right there. And again, it doesn't happen that often. Usually August, you're just waiting for September.
And there's always some downside, right, Brendon? Like there's always something that we can usually find in this deal where we're like, okay, well, this is good, but we just took a 4-year flyer on a guy that's coming off what was called a catastrophic knee injury. But you don't have that here. It's all just complete low risk, high reward. You know, it's really just, we don't give any of these deals, Brendon. You don't give any of these deals where it's just all, I mean, like, look at the other Williams deal we did last year, you know, and how much people were turning over and getting frustrated by the 2nd round pick we lost and what that meant. And then what if he just leaves in free agency now? And so there is some of that negative to pull back on that kind of deal. Nothing here. You're giving up nothing. You're paying nothing, and you might be getting top 5 center performance play. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. I'm down with that. So yeah, it's worthy of a 6-hour stream.
Oh yeah. It was a lot of fun. Always fun chopping it up on good news days. Isaac, and thank you again, Yellen, for all your support, brother. Isaac, thank you for the $10 donation. It says, gentlemen, there is no fighting in the war room. Thing is, VMAC training field isn't in the effing war room. As long as nobody gets seriously injured or hurt, I like the intensity. Echoes of the Legion of Boom. So let me set the stage on this real quick, Brendon. For those, I think most people know what Isaac's talking about, but for those that might not be aware, we had yesterday, it sounds like we had something akin to Vietnam trench warfare and going on in the field, multiple fights breaking out, DK Metcalf doing his Aaron Donald impression, slinging helmets. And some people tripped out about this a little bit, Brendon. Are you a flutter on this one? Has this one got you freaked out, or where do you stand on the happen yesterday?
I mean, I think it's fair to say that a line or two was crossed, which is why Macdonald had to actually intervene and throw
Mistakes were made.
Yeah, and he had to get his Joey Crawford on and throw somebody out of practice. Two guys out of practice, actually. I think.
Yeah.
So obviously a line was crossed, but I think the most important thing that people need to take away from the I think it was yesterday, actually, the training camp fights. It was yesterday, right?
Yep. Yeah.
Is that Greg Bell, one thing that he said right after it was, I haven't seen a practice like that since the early days of the LOB. And that's what you want to get back to, right? Because the LOB went to Super Bowls. They won a Super Bowl. They did, they did amazing things together. So this is usually a little bit of the price you have to pay if you want to have a great team. There aren't that many teams out there that win championships filled with Boy Scouts that always just, march in a straight line.
And we've tried the Boy Scout method, by the way. I can track you back to NFL teams where general managers tried to bring out guys that are just good old guys that are going to not have to play on that edge, play on that line. And I'll show you teams that miss the playoffs. I'll show you teams that are middling. I'll show you teams that don't go anywhere. And it may be an unfortunate part for some fans out there that they don't like. I don't want them to have to fight. I don't want to see DK playing with the edgy plays with the times. This is football, and this is the physicality of the sport, is that you have to bring a mentality into play to beat another man in front of you physically. And it requires a certain mentality to do that. And it's not one that just is, you're nice and happy and good-minded spirit and everything's always good. Sometimes it's that edginess. And Jackson Smith and Jigba talked about this in an interview with 710 where he said, hey, I think it is kind of good. I think it's I've been on these kind of practices with this is something that tends to happen. And if it wasn't happening, I'd consider that to be more of a concern, is what he said. And I agree with him. I think that this is something that's a part of, if you want to have a team that's a tough and rough team, you want the tackling to get better, you want to see how that can improve, then you have to have the intensity of practices ratcheted up for that to happen. And once that happens, then you're going to get some chippiness, then you're likely to get some fights.
Right. It's the cost of doing business by and large. Not always, but most of the time. Yeah,
exactly. But thank you, Isaac. I appreciate all your donations to the chat. And y'all, and I saw as well, I do think I'll ask Brandon on this one. I saw your note in there in comments as well, that I do think that I'm having a little bit of a growing worry on this. I got a clip I'm dropping on my channel, on the Clips channel, Brendon, just in regards to a little bit of a worry where they talk about wanting obnoxious communication with this defense in the secondary. And I'm wondering if we might see our 12th man revved up a little bit more than we've seen in recent years here, especially that defense starts to play really well in stadium. And remember about how the LOB would talk about, and that not being a defense that was necessarily requiring as much total complete communication throughout, where they would talk about sometimes the difficulties in getting communications through. You see some potential stuff that they have to get through. I don't know if they got to bring in some ASL guys, you know what I mean? But they're going to have to potentially kind of figure out a road across here. I feel like if they're going to try to be in that state of having to, because there's so many guys got to communicate so many things in this defense intricately and do it quickly, that you're not going to be able to hear the guy next to you at times in that stadium from a foot away. And I think that they're going to have to, I'm sure they got a plan in place, but I do wonder about that. And I do think it's a valid issue to look at, or hopefully they're addressing.
Yeah. I will say it seems like our fan base in the stadium is pretty perceptive. So if that starts to become a problem, I think they do find a way to pull it back a little bit for the benefit of the team. They did pretty quickly figure out that you're not supposed to be really loud when the team is on offense. I remember that was a thing for a little bit years ago, and then they figured it out and it stopped happening. So I'm not overly concerned about that, but it is definitely an angle, right? It is definitely an angle, because I guess that's the benefit of the Pete Carroll defense, right? You don't need to communicate because everyone does the same thing every play.
That's my thinking on it, is that they have some minor adjustments to be made, but overall you're running cover 3. I'm going to my drop. There's not a lot of, whereas with this, it's changing one coverage to the next, and you're going from this responsibility to that responsibility. And then that guy over there needs to understand he's going to this responsibility. And then this is so it's all got to kind of interchange. And I wonder if there's going to be a little bit of some issues on that if it does get loud. And maybe not. It's just something I'm kind of wondering about recently on that side of it. So we got through kind of all of our our current.
Yeah, those were the three notable things that went down over the last couple months in terms of like team building, right? In terms of like players, contracts, stuff like that. So that basically gets us to training camp.
Yes, and it's been a good training camp. We haven't had any major injuries necessarily. We had the little Geno Smith scare. With training camp, if I was to give me a couple just notable things off the rip off your head that have been really the main stories for you at this camp, tracking it so far.
Well, it feels like DK Metcalf's locked in more so than he's ever been. It feels like every day I'm hearing, wow, DK Metcalf is making an amazing play. He's making an amazing catch. He did this amazing thing. He caught this pass in traffic. He's beating Witherspoon and Woolen off the line. He's catching deep passes. So DK feels really locked in, looks ready to have a really good season. In this offense, DK is never going to have like 1,900 yards. It's never going to happen. But could he have a really efficient 1,200 yards? Absolutely. And I'm here for it. Charles Cross has had an excellent training camp so far. It feels like every time they talk about the offensive line, they're talking about him being the guy who's doing things. So those would be the two guys that really stand out to me on offense. And defensively, I would say Woolen, because he was a guy who, Greg Bell even wrote an article about this. He kind of got humbled last year because he got benched a couple times for poor play, and he didn't have as good of a year in 2023. And we talked about how, this could be a big year for him. If he doesn't snap out of it and start doing, at the very least tackling a little bit better, it could go a bad direction with him. And he's looked much better. And it seems like he's taken the criticism last year personally, but he's also taken it to heart. And also he's learning from that. He's, he doesn't like the criticism, but he's internalized it in a way that is productive. And I'd also say Trey Brown, he's playing for that contract. He's trying to get that second deal, and it's not going to be easy for him to get on the field this year because of all the cornerbacks in front of him, but he's going to force his way out there. So I'm going to say those would be four guys that really stand out to me positively.
Yeah, we've had a Mike Jackson injury a little bit, and that's probably given him that inroads to really go out there and take hold of that starting job. You're going to spend most of your time in nickel. So you got to, I technically call it a starting job because of how much time you're out there in that way. It sounds like Byron Murphy's also looking like the real deal as the young kid coming in. He's looking like not only the first round pick, but I mean, how many veterans I've heard note of the fact that he is seemingly ready to go in the way that they speak about him. Not in the, he's got a long way to go. He's rough, but he's talented. That's not how they're talking about him.
Yeah, he's quick off the ball. And they even said the coaches worked with him a little bit on him improving his get off, which was already really good. But they decided to go ahead and put a little bit of work into making it better, and it has. So that's exciting because that was kind of his strength as a player, right? His get off at the snap.
Oh yeah, holding up already a strength to a, and yeah, he said he like narrowed his stance or something, I think is what he said. And
yeah, that sounds about right. But yeah, I'm excited. I think he's going to be a big time disruptor. I still think about, what did Alec Baldwin say in Glengarry Ross, right? He said coffee's for closers. And I don't know if he's ready to be a closer yet. I don't know if he's going to be ready to be the guy who actually makes the play, but he's going to cause havoc in there. And, for a rookie, that's more than enough.
It is. And he's going to a situation, I think, that'll be nice for his development where he doesn't have to be that guy centerpiece day one. He went to the Rams. They would have expected him to be Donald 2.0 from the jump. And here he gets to kind of fit on this line, go through the rotation of snaps and find his role with it. And it sounds like he is, by all accounts, the real deal. Real deal. Does sound like the receivers are doing real well in addition to that, Brendon. JSN, Bobo. Also, I agree. I'm hearing the same thing with DK, but we've got JSN and Bobo seemingly right there step for step with him, and that they're making their share of plays too and doing. Bobo showing you last year was real, legit.
Yeah, there was some buzz about a month and a half ago that he might be a surprise cut, and it didn't make any sense to me. And I think if there was any conversation about that before, there's not going to be any now. Like, it never made sense to me because even if you don't ever throw him the ball, he's such a good blocker. He can help you like that. Like, I don't know. That one confused me.
Yeah, I could never see that being a possibility. He was a great blocker for one of the maybe five to eight best receiving blockers in the sport last year. And anytime he threw in the ball, he caught it, and he won on the outside, not just as a slot. I mean, that if you had to look at him coming out like, well, he's only a slot only guy, he's showing you he can win on the outside, including in training camp. The Superman catch he made was on the outside. The scrimmage touchdown catch the other day that he made was on the outside. He's showing you that there's some future here, I think, Brendon, of possibly being that guy. As I believe JSN long-term will slide into be mainly a slot guy, and that's not a bad thing, but you're going to play a majority of, 3 wide receiver sets. So who's the number 2 on the outside? Who's going to be essentially that Z then if you have DK here long-term? I think Bobo's making a strong argument potentially here. We'll see how he continues through preseason, but making a strong argument to maybe be looked at as that guy who could be that number 2 long-term. Would you not agree?
I'm going to be open to it. I'm going to certainly give him a chance there. I feel like he might be better as like a situational guy, somebody that you don't put a massive workload on, and then he's there when you need him. I don't want to take him away from that if that's what he ends up being, but I'm going to be open to it. He could improve. He could get better in some of these areas. He was a rookie last year. I mean, he's not done. He's not a complete finished product yet.
No, and he was a 4th receiver for a receiving squad that was pretty healthy last year. So on that receiving core as a rookie with a 1st-round pick of JSN that they're working to feature and get his touches with the Akie not getting his, there's only so many opportunities you're going to get with Noah Fant, the tight end crew you had. He wasn't going to get an opportunity to really go out there and shine. But I do think he did the most with what you gave him. And he's continued to not only do that last year, he did in the preseason last year. He did in OTAs. He's done in OTAs here. He's done throughout the training camp period here. He's been very consistent in that respect of things.
Yeah, I'm excited for it, even though I don't know how many opportunities he's going to get this year. I think we're going to run the ball more this year than last. So
it's true, especially if we're up in some games and not wait until the 4th quarter. And try to win.
You saw Macdonald comment on that, right? He's like, you want to start strong, you want to finish strong. I don't know if he knew what he was doing when he said that, but maybe he did.
Yeah, I think he sometimes inexplicably does that stuff and he doesn't realize that he did that in the training camp. He's done that about we're not just going to run A and B gap runs. And it's like, you are you referencing what I'm thinking? You can't just be like he said in his initial preference conference. I remember when John was standing beside him, he's like, you can't just show up your coverage and just show what your coverage is going to be and then just run that. And John's over there going, doing this move. And, I'm like, does he know what he's talking about there? Because is that a shot? That might have been a shot. He didn't know.
Maybe.
I don't think he knows, but it makes it funny nonetheless when he does say it. And it was music to my ears, Brendon, that Macdonald did say that, look, we're going to try to win this in the 1st quarter. Yeah, we're going to try to get out on teams. Yeah, we're going to try to get on them and step on their throat and go get a win. And it's not about waiting until the 4th quarter to turn it on. It's not about feeling a team out through 1 or 2 quarters before you decide to try to, really utilize everything you have within your means and disposal to try to go out there and win. And that's, I think, what you got to do. I don't think you can just afford to just be always trying to punt down and get to the 4th quarter and hope your quarterback can bring you back on a 4th quarter comeback. That's going to happen at times, but I don't think you should seek it out.
Right.
We got a couple donations in here. Randall McDaniel, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, is DK going to scrap with Diggs and Jamal at joint practice?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have theorized that. I feel like the joint practices, not that I know a ton about them because we used to never have them, but from the joint practices I've seen from other teams, they usually do result in extracurricular violence. So I don't think it would surprise anybody.
Yeah, it's another thing that I chalk up to a little bit, Brendon, like the fighting in camp thing. Would I like to do inter joint practices? No, I would not like to. But is the modern NFL what it is in the state it is, where it doesn't allow for these players to get hardened up in training camp? There's no more two-a-days. There's no more padded practices and OTAs in the offseason. You already know they're not going to play very much in the preseason games. You got to find some spots and places that you can get these guys to callus up those bodies to be able to tackle right, to stick their nose in there, to not get injured if they're trying to make a basic tackle. And if that's going to happen to do this and you're going to get fights from it, that's just, kind of the way it is. I will say on the good side of this, most of the time when the fights do occur, Brendon, there doesn't tend to be a major injury out of the fights. They look bad and there's, DK swinging a helmet yesterday was not a good look. And I know some people are going to freak out on that, but at the end of the day, no one really ends up coming out of these, too beaten up. You might get a bloody lip or a busted nose, but it's not going to be anything out of control. It would be fun to watch DK just lift up Diggs. One arm, just kind of, pick him up and they kind of just grab him. Because Diggs is going to be pretty small to DK. He's probably coming up to about right here on DK.
Yeah. Although, Trey Brown gives up 50 pounds to DK. And when they go at it in training camp, he doesn't give an inch. So
No, he doesn't, man.
sometimes it's not about your physical size.
That's right. Size of the, not the size of the dog, the size of the fight in the dog. And we'll see what happens. So yeah, it'll be fun to watch how that goes, the joint practice and the way that breaks down on that, Randall. But you can probably count on there is going to be a fight. No doubt about that. Randall with another $2 donation. He says, Brendon, chances Will Disley finally eclipses 1,000 yards.
Herbert's going to have like 200 passing attempts this year or something, isn't he? They're just going to run the ball over and over and over again. I feel it.
It seems likelier and likelier. I don't know if you've seen Quentin Johnson cut-ups coming out of camp there, but seems like he can't catch a cold right now. I mean, he's dropping everything, and they are definitely young there at receiver after cutting away a couple of their guys there. And John loves to, he's got Mark Roman in the house, Brendan. You know, he's got his old Niner offensive coordinator in there, the Baltimore Raven offensive coordinator with Lamar through his first couple of years. Would seem to be, you know, kind of evidence to what you're talking about, that not a lot of throwing Herbert this year, that they're just going to try to grind games out. That's the Harbaugh way, though. He was doing that in Michigan. He's doing that for the Stanford, doing that. I mean, he wins games that way. But that is going to make it hard for any tight end to get, 1,000 yards. He'll run a lot of 12 personnel. Disley will get a lot of run if he can stay healthy. But
yeah, are they going to have a single 1,000-yard receiver on that team this year? I'm thinking about it.
I think Ladd McConkey's going to go for 1,000.
Okay, I can dig it.
Yeah, he's having a
tight though.
It'll be tight, but he's going to be, I just think, a guy that is their third down guy, and he's a quarterback's best friend because he's a route runner you can trust to create separation on his route, and that's the kind of receiver that a guy like Herbert's going to really like to throw to. First, I got to throw him open a little bit, trust he can break after I make the throw, and I think Ladd's going to fit in there and give him that kind of security blanket guy inside, and he'll just keep pumping him the ball in there and working him. He's having a good camp too. So long odds on that one, I think, from Brendan's standpoint. Brendan, give him a percentage, Brendan.
Oh man, that's like getting through the asteroid field in Empire Strikes Back, isn't it? That's like.
Do I have shields? Do I have shields at maximum capacity?
Oh boy.
Have I taken some photons and my shields have been weakened? Like
I'll give you 50 to 1 odds on that one. No problem.
Oh my goodness. Okay. He's going long on that one, Randall. He's going long. Appreciate you, brother. Yalin, thank you for the $5 donation, Yalin. I really appreciate the double dip dono, and you as well on that, Randall. Randall, I missed another dono for you. I'll get it on there in just a sec. He says, "Hey, BNB, there's talk that players are fined for praising other players. Thoughts?"
I've not heard this. Is this something you've heard of?
The only time I've ever heard of guys getting fined for talking to the media or the offensive linemen back in the day, where they would fine each other if like one of them talked to the media or something. But I've never heard of that happening, and I've heard praising going on. So there must be a lot of guys getting fined then, because I mean, Byron Murphy has had everybody freaking talking about. Hankins just yesterday was like, I think he's going to be the defensive player of the year.
Yeah. Did Ryan Grubb get fined when he praised Geno Smith? Like, I doubt it. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Like, what kind of locker room are you trying to create with that? Is that
like stifle the positivity, stifle talking up your brother, stifle talking up your teammate, like, why?
Belichick wouldn't do that, right?
Yeah, I don't. That's not even a Belichick move on that side of it. So it just doesn't make sense. I don't know what it would accomplish doing that. Seems kind of non-productive.
Yeah. Even Nick Saban wouldn't do that.
No, and he's as negative as they come. He'll spank his player's butt on the field in front of 65,000 people multiple times. As punishment, by the way, not as like supportive. Like, what were you doing with that throw?
Absolutely.
But thank you, Yolin. Appreciate the donation. That's a weird one. I had not heard that. Come out at all. Randall with the third dono. Thank you, Randall, for the triple dono drop, brother. I appreciate it. Says, I love how Mac challenges Witherspoon and doesn't hide it.
And he's rising to the challenge.
He is. Yeah, he wants to be great. And I think Randall's onto something with this, Brendan, where I get the distinction a little bit. You heard it the other day in the not press conference, but when he's on 710, they were talking to Macdonald, and he said, I expect greatness out of him. And he wasn't trying to say it like I'm pumping up. It like slipped out of his, like he almost trying to caught what he said right as soon as he said it. Like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be. But that's what you see as the intention of what he's trying to do with him, where he recognizes this kid for the special talent he is. And as the type of coach Mike Macdonald is wired to be, I'm not just taking this guy to try to make him better. I want you to be out there seeking greatness because I know you have greatness inside of you. And I think there's some coaches that wouldn't always take that route here, Brendon. I think there's some coaches that would be like, you're great. Now it's on you to take that greatness as far as you're going to take it. I'll coach you up as good as I can. I'll do what I can on it. But verse really like putting, like it sounds like, Brendon, where he's really putting kind of the feet to the fire on this one with Witherspoon and saying, no, we're going to hold you to a standard. We're going to expect this is what you're going to play at because you're capable of playing at that level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I read an article from, I think it was Brady Henderson earlier this offseason about how in year 2, Witherspoon's already become a leader on the defense because he's so vocal and also a really, really good player. So it's working. It seems to be working. And I mean, this Witherspoon experiment is going as well as I think anybody could have dreamed of so far. And, I liked him when we drafted him well enough, but I certainly didn't think he was going to be able to do all the things he's done so far. So I think Mac's handling it the right way so far.
I think he is. And I think that's going to aid and help already coming to a defense that was going to take Spoon's abilities, Brendon, and maximize it to the utmost by utilizing him in all the ways that he's capable. You also have a coach now that's looking to maximize him from that mental state. And I always say that's, the difference between the bad coach to the good coach to the great coach. The bad coach will get 95% out of a player. The good coach will get 100%. What you got, I got. The great coach will reach for that 105%. He'll reach for that what's beyond what you think or somebody might look at you and believe is your capabilities of what you can do. You can go even further beyond that. And I'm going to get you up to that spot of things. And that's something that I think that he's trying to ascend for here a little bit with Spoon. And it's only going to be good. It's only going to be a beneficial thing for him long term. Thank you, though, Randall. Appreciate you, brother. You guys are very kind. All the donations. Rod Do, thank you for the $5 donation. Great to see you in the house, brother. Says, what are the top 5 things you guys are going to be looking for in the preseason?
Well, pretty good chance for us to talk a little bit about this Chargers game that comes up on Saturday, since that was obviously the next thing we were going to get to.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to necessarily list 5, but I want to start with Derek Hall. Derek Hall, because this is a big year for him. This is an important year for him. Presumably, he's going to get to go up against the great Joe Alt for a decent chunk of the night, if not Rashawn Slater. We'll see exactly how the Chargers decide to play their players. But I'm going to say Derek Hall would be really interesting to me because his ability to get to where we were expecting him to be last year is really going to be key for this defense to be able to have a good rotation at the edge.
I think that's a good first one. Let me go with the second one here. I think the way the two schemes onboard through the preseason, I'm expecting that you're going to see less vanilla than you might see a year or two from now once both of these schemes are implemented and in place, for instance. There's going to be, I think, some trying of out stuff. Let's try this out with this guy in the field. Let's work something that we're going to work in the regular season here from stack front, blitz concept stuff off defensively and offensively to the intricacies of what they're going to try to run, I think, when you get to the regular game day and that as well. And how well those players look in their development within these schemes. Like how comfortable are they getting with it? Are we seeing a lot of mental mistakes on both sides of the ball? Are we seeing blown coverages? Are we seeing a lack of, cohesion on both sides of parts like you'd hope there to be? And that's one of the main things for me that stands out with both sides of the ball there.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one for sure. I mean, we've got a new defense and a new offense. Not too often a team gets a new both at the same time. I feel like usually they try to stagger it a little bit. Okay, so another thing that I would be looking for, I want to see how we react to the new kickoffs because I have a sneaking suspicion that there's going to be a lot of chaos in the league because teams are not going to be used to covering those kickoffs, and you're going to see, at least early in the season, a lot of big returns. Just because teams are adjusting to it. So I want to see how we cover the kickoffs, and I want to see how we return the kicks ourselves, because I don't know who our return man's going to be. It could be a few different guys, and we got to find somebody good, because I think that could be worth a touchdown or two over the first couple months of the season.
Agreed. Yeah, very much agreed there. And it's going to be fun to watch this kind of unfurl. We don't know what we're going to get with it. And like you say, I think they're going to get a little bit of fluctuation of what we see. Maybe some weeks where there's nothing going on with it, and other weeks where it's, like you say, pure chaos on that side. And so a fun part to look at there. My next item would be up, Radu, tackling. Tackling has been an issue for this team going back a couple of years. Some of that is the number of snaps and extra snaps that they have to play on a football field, which tires them out. When an NFL player gets tired out on the defensive side of the ball, the first things that's going to go is tackling. But can this team be better tackling? Can the intensity level come up? Can there be a sense of urgency from these guys on that defensive side of the ball and how they fly around to the ball again? Can we get a recapturing of that spirit here? And I think that's a sense of something you can get in the preseason, that you don't have to wait for the regular season to know whether or not you have that as part of your club's identity.
All right. Yeah. I mean, tackling, it's certainly been a problem lately. So the sooner it's not a problem, the better. I'd go Laken Tomlinson next, because I know that there's been some positive buzz around Tomlinson this camp, but I'm just not buying it quite yet. I have real concerns about that. I'm not convinced that was the right move. And I'm going to say him in particular, because if he can play competently this year, that changes things. But I'm worried he's going to be a bad scheme fit, and I'm worried he's not going to be effective. So if he plays, and he might not in this first game, I'll say that, because he is a veteran and because we know Geno's not playing.
Yeah.
I would say Laken Tomlinson's a guy to watch.
It's a good one. This is an obvious one. That one's a good one. Not as obvious. And these are two obvious ones, but I think the combination of Haynes and Murphy stand out to me, that you look through this draft class, and I think it's going to be an okay draft class. Then we'll get some value from it, and some of the Barner long-term, and, some of the cornerbacks from Auburn maybe develop into this. But when you look at this draft and this upcoming season, and the hope this upcoming season that those youthful guys can actually help you this year, that you're not in that sort of year of waiting for the guys to come on board and kind of figure out how to be a pro. You talked about Derek Hall. He kind of went through that last year, right? Where it's going to take me a year to kind of figure this out. Oh, I'm dealing with some dinged up injury stuff. I'm kind of not able to give you that much impact year one. Can Murphy come in and not be the game, like you said as well, not be the game record, like suddenly turns into this, like he's instantly out the gate, this top 3, top 5 defense tackle force, but that he can be a force from those confines of maybe the reduced down snaps that you're going to give him versus other guys out there. And that he then provides that kind of wild card defensive tackle guy out there on that line that can do that. And if you see him in the preseason coming out, I think, and having some real good impact with that, that does raise your hopes that he can be that guy to come out and give you 5.5 sacks his rookie year, give you good run defense on top of it, and be that fit in the scheme. And Haynes, much kind of the same way, to maybe just a little bit of a lesser degree, in that can he work into the mobile stuff that we think within this offense in the preseason? How does he move in space? Is it as good as it was on the tape? And then can he really lock down that right guard job? Because it doesn't sound like anybody's yet, as Mike Macdonald or anybody's talked about, Grubb's talked about it, nothing has completely solidified itself inside. This is why you're making the Connor Williams signing. So that's two that I'll be definitely paying attention to as well.
Right. As of right now, Haynes is still the backup, and I expected him to start day one. So if he's going to make the move, it's going to have to be in the preseason. So
yeah,
I still like his chances, but he's got to go out there and do it. Mm-hmm. Another one that I would throw out there would be McIntosh and Helani, because there's been a lot of buzz that Helani looks really good and he might be leapfrogging McIntosh, mostly because he's a better blocker out of the backfield. But I want to see how that looks in the preseason. I want to see, because obviously McIntosh, is he even really a running back? It feels like he could just as easily be a receiver. Maybe they're looking at him like that. Maybe that's part of the issue. And Helani's a power back. I know he's small, but he runs with pop. He's kind of an undersized power back. So maybe they view that as being a skill set that is more valuable to them than McIntosh.
Yeah, McIntosh too. I think the question mark you have, why is he a 7th round pick when it all is said and done, despite the productivity at Georgia and having the skill set that is both kind of receiver and running back, both? You think that'd be a guy be more drafted 5th roundish. Well, speed. Does he have enough get up and go right now. And from what they're saying, even versus a guy like Holani to be that third guy. And I agree with you. It's an important position to look at because of how thin our running back position has gotten over in the recent years and how often we have to go to that third or fourth running back. And so the guy coming up and rising up is going to be interesting. And with McIntosh, as you say, we don't know what we got him. We got a couple of cut-ups from him back in training camp last year. We looked great on a couple of runs, and then he got injured at the scrimmage game, and then we got nothing from him. And he looked good at Georgia, man. I think he ideally would be a guy you'd say would be your third down back. I know Charbonnet fitted that role well, and Walker did that stuff, and Holani's got the bat. But theoretically, with this guy's skill set, he would be your ideal third down back. Right. You could run him in motion. You could isolate him out on a linebacker, have him run a go route, and he's going to run past that linebacker because he's just got a good. Or you can run a stop and go route on that linebacker and kill him on a sluggo. He's got that to do that, but like you say, they do seem like what we're kind of as much as we can take away from camp, and this is why it's going to be very interesting to watch the games here with these backs, is because indeed it's a little bit open right now.
Yeah, I feel like all that McIntosh stuff is definitely true. And the issue is he's not blocking as well as Holani, which you got to be able to block if you're a third down back. And that might be the issue here. But that could resolve itself over the next couple weeks.
It's an important one, too, because we're not going to be max protecting as much as we had prior as well with this, Brendon, right? You run probably a little bit less 12 personnel, so a little bit less running back, one tight end or two tight ends. You're going to be now in more spread concepts out, running backs back there by himself. So that back's highly reliant on now having to pick up those blitzers on his own and be Johnny on the spot, because you're going to have just your 5 guys in the 6, and then everybody else is out running routes. It means those guys have got to be able to do it. You can't get around it. You can't scheme over it. You got to have that guy be able to get his nose in there and get dirty and make it happen on that. So let's be good five things. I think we gave 6 there on that one, Radu. But those would be about the main things that I think that are probably the keynotes. Anything else you got, Brendon, stands out for you?
I mean, I'm going to be watching everything, but those would be the things that I would really recommend keying in on because, obviously DK Metcalf's going to make the team. It's not like, oh, he's got to have a good preseason or he's not going to make the team. We know he's going to make the team. Yeah. So obviously we all love Metcalf, I think. Well, maybe not all of us, but most of us. I don't want to get in trouble here. Yes. But, what he does in the preseason doesn't really matter. What Lockett or JSN does in the preseason doesn't really matter. But it matters like McIntosh, Holani, Derek Hall, Christian Haynes. That matters. Yeah,
agreed. Very much agreed. You brought up Darrell Taylor. That'd be maybe one more guy we throw into this. $3 million to still be saved. Let's remember this. That's not a guaranteed contract. So haven't heard a lot of noise out of him in training camp so far. When I went down and watched training camp in person, didn't do anything notable to my eyes. In fact, I think that the injury that happened with Draymond Jones on the day that I was there, I don't want to say he caused it, or it's not. No, he's on George Fan. He kind of got George Fan dinged up. But that's another guy to maybe watch for, see if something works with him better in this defense, because there's 3 million reasons why the Seahawks might look to move off from him, especially if Nelson Cesar can be a good player for them in this season on that side of it.
Right.
Thank you, Radu. Appreciate you, brother. Long live the King with a $10 donation. Thank you, King, for that donation. You guys are very kind tonight, man. You're kicking us off right here on the BNB show, and we appreciate it. He says, BNB. Off-year Jason Myers may have been an angel in disguise of a villain. Oh, a sheep in wolf's clothing, or a wolf in sheep's and wolf clothing? That's how that would be then? Hypothetically, had he cashed in kicks that had us at 11-win season last season, would Jody make the change? How would the roster look?
I would assume that she would not make the change in that circumstance, because if the Seahawks had gotten to 11 wins last year, that would have been, I think that's exactly what I had before the season started. So they would have, quote unquote, lived up to expectations. And I don't think there would have been much of a reason to fire him at that point. It would have been kind of weird to almost like, were you expecting to win the Super Bowl? So yeah, we probably don't. Now this is kind of the eternal battle, right? Is it worth it to lose games if it means change gets made that needs to get made? That's one that I struggle with, right? That's tough because sometimes you don't even know if the change is going to happen, right? I back in 2021, I had so many people in my comments who were rooting for us to lose because we can finally fire Pete Carroll. Well, we lost a bunch of games and we didn't fire Pete Carroll, and it's like, well, you just rooted for your team to lose for nothing. So, that's not good. Nobody likes that. So I'm not saying we should all retroactively say we're happy that we didn't make the playoffs last year, but if you look at it objectively, absolutely. I don't think Carroll goes anywhere. I don't think the team does some of the things they do in the offseason with an 11-win season.
Yeah, I think on this Long Live the King, Brennan's probably hitting it pretty accurately for where it is on the situation, being that if you had one, you were basically year 2 of the Russell rebuild. You were a game better than the prior year. That looks like improvement, even if it's moderate improvement. So probably not then what it was on the other side of it, which looked like underwhelming, and that you underperformed and didn't get the most out because it was less. You went backwards. It does suck to me, and this is my own little bone to pick with it, is that I hope that would not be the case. I agree with Brendan that's probably is the case, but I would hope that the case would be more that Jody and the committee that look at this team look at it as what's really working here versus just, well, we came to a bottom line of got to 11 wins, but we got bounced out the playoffs, because that would have still meant if you got to 11 wins, got bounced out of the playoffs, that you were still having then only one win in the playoffs since 2017. One win since 2017 if you'd gone through last year with that 11 wins getting in. Is it progress? Yes. But is it still then an indicative of the fact that Carroll was the right guy and that was the direction to stay with, and that was going to continue to get better? That's the key point. That it was going to continue to go up. You're going to continue to now become a contender. I think that there was less proof of that if the committee was really looking at this intelligently. And I only say I think they're looking at this intelligently, Brendan, because I think they came back to Coach Carroll and said specific things they wanted to see changed, right? It wasn't just a matter of you didn't get to these wins, you're out. It was, you didn't get to these wins and you need to get rid of the defensive coordinator. We're not paying Jamal Adams. The throwing the bad money out for no reason, just because we want to reward guys or you like the guy. We're not doing that anymore. So, and he was like, no, I'm not doing it. And then that's when they had their mutual parting of ways kind of click in. But again, I agree with you, Brendan. I think it was probably doesn't mean that that's not still the way it was, that it would have been that way.
Yeah. I mean, some people, and when I say so, I mean, the pro Carroll people said that it was ridiculous to let him go after a 9-win season. But so, maybe they would have done it after an 11-win season because, it's still a winning season. I guess it's possible. But I mean, how often does a coach get fired after an 11-win season in the NFL? It's probably very rare. Marty Schottenheimer with the Chargers back in 2006. That's all I can think of.
It really is. But I do come back to that number where you go, look, you've been here for 7 years there. 2017, that's 7 years. You have one playoff win. Is that indicative of you being successful? Is that indicative of you being on the right path to taking us to the ultimate success? Or is that when you were here through the first 5 years that you were here, we had freaking, including his 9, 10, 11 seasons, right? Where he got to one playoff win with the Saints, including there. But then you had all those wins in 12 and 13. In your first 5 years here with a roster that was empty, you got us to 8 or 9, whatever playoff wins it was at that point. So it's I think that there would have been something there with them looking at this going, yeah, okay, you can get us to a middling, you can get us to a little bit better than average. We know you're capable of doing that. Yeah, we know that your floor is really high on this team year in and year out, and we can count on that. But not to take a shot at the Mariners and have them catch strays here, but are we trying to become the Mariners, or are we trying to fit to the standard that was set by my brother? And to me, Jody's shown a lot of indication here that she's trying to fit to the model of her brother. And I can make a lot of different cases for that in her time as an owner here now, including, for instance, the fact that Seattle Seahawks have been top 10 in spending money over the last 3 years in the NFL. Not 10 years, not 5 years, not 20 years. The last 3 years, bottom line cash kicked out by our ownership has been top 10 in this sport. And so I don't know. That's a great question and hard to say which way it goes. But I do think, Brendan, you're probably right where it would have maybe been just enough at that point to keep the can kicked down the road.
Yeah, I think they would have given him a chance to prove that he could fix the defense rather than just say, okay, that's enough.
Yeah, I think you're probably right on that. I do. Thank you, King. Great question. Randall McDaniel with a $2 dono says, who are the predictions on who will the captains be?
Geno and Lockett on offense. Defense, I'm going to say Jaron Reed. And maybe Big Cat.
How about Jaron Reed, Julian Love?
That could work. Do you give it to Witherspoon already, or is it too early?
It's probably too early, but where you're going to want to go with this is that as we've always heard, your leaders need to be your best players. The Byron Murphy, part of the reason he was picked that we hear about him and talked about by Albert Brewer a couple weeks ago, and the way the teams looked at him was as a, not just the alpha type, but as a leader type. And that it's your leaders can't just be the guys that are the back end tryhards on the roster. They got to be your best players. I think long term that is the way it's going to go, but you're right, probably a little bit too early. So I like Randall, his predictions offensively. I can't push back on defense. I probably would go Jaron Julian because I get the impression Julian's kind of the back end guy, and then you got your front end guy at that point between the two on that side of it. That seems something in that neighborhood.
Yeah, and then wouldn't it just be Myers and Dixon at that point?
Yes, because you don't really have a special team Belore Maven type, right? You don't have that guy. That's
you don't even have DJ Dallas anymore.
No. So probably would be those two guys. Yeah. Or no, I was gonna say no. They won't do Lavishka.
Yeah, Chris Stoll.
Yeah, Chris Stoll, the long snapper. He's
a good long snapper.
He's got a great voice in the room. Underrated voice in the room, Chris Stoll for the Seahawks as a captain there. Right. Randall with another $2 donation. Thank you for that. Randall says, listen to Mac today. Definitely not sitting everyone. No. Good note here. We're going to get the no Geno Smith. A couple select guys will maybe miss that are dealing with their little dings and bangs and booms and all that. But everybody else is going to be out there playing at least a little bit.
Yeah, I think there could be a couple other starters on offense sit because when you don't have Geno out there, it's not as valuable for them to be out there. But it's going to be some starters on offense, they said, and most of the starters on defense. So I think you're going to get to see Witherspoon. You're going to get to see Woolen and Love and Jenkins and, well, not Baker because Baker's hurt, but you're going to see Dodson. You're going to see Murphy, maybe Draymond, because I guess he did participated a little bit today.
I bet they don't play him. It's a hammy because it's that hammy. You know, that hammy thing is like you got 98%. You can still twing it back to raw.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. But maybe some big cat. I don't know. He's like on the wrong side of 30. I might err on the side of caution there. But I mean, it makes sense, right? They got a lot to learn. They got a lot of stuff to pick up. So there's going to be a reason to watch these preseason games. And remember, Macdonald comes from the Ravens. They take their preseason wins very seriously over there.
Would they have like 22 straight or something?
Something
wins in a row. That like it was like they was a big deal. Like Harbaugh was really proud of that. It's like, okay, buddy, you do you. It's a preseason win. Like, but it is going to make preseason funner for us, Randall, because it's not just backups in there from the jump. It's going to be guys out there, and they're going to be running, I think, true stuff. So you're going to get a flavor of what you're going to get in the real games here, and you're going to get to see then with that where the progress is at with the team and how they're progressing in addition to all that.
Right.
Thank you, Randall. And coming in with another donation of $2. Thanks for all those, Randall. Says, we make a trade prior to the season. Not a big move, but a move.
I think the chamber is empty. Like, I don't know what you would trade for. And by the way, I think Randy's next super chat kind of ties into this super chat where he talks about maybe trading for a young linebacker.
Right.
So maybe, but I don't know who it would be. And honestly, I know the linebacker room doesn't look great right now, but I kind of like the approach of not overextending yourself at that position because it's not a high value position the way it used to be. Right. It's one of the positions that I think you can afford to cheap out a little bit at, and you can get away with it because the position doesn't mean what it used to mean back in the 80s and 90s. So I'm not really feeling like we need to do anything there, and I'm not feeling like we have the ammo for it anyway.
Yeah, the only way I can see it going down ammo-wise, as you say, is because I don't think John's looking to move draft picks at this point. It'd be maybe a cheap signing off the street more than a trade. Is if maybe he can find a partner for like an Olatimi deal. If the team wants to hold on to Nick Harris, they're probably not going to hold on to 3 centers on the roster. They could, but I'm getting the impression we're more likely to hold on kind of an extra guy in a different spot, like guard, for instance, or something like that. So can you find a team that has a pre-draft evaluation grade on Olatimi where they feel like he can be at the very least a very solid backup for them, and then they have a influx of an extra kind of linebacker you like in the same way of a guy who's maybe, you like the scouting report coming out, you feel like he can fit, or Macdonald liked him coming out, feels like he can be a fit at that point. Maybe something like that could sync up. And it also could be something here too, Randall, and thanks for the donations on this, where they look to address it more down the road if there is an issue with the linebacker, Brendan, right? Or it does become, rather than a prior to a season deal, more of a trade deadline deal. That's what you push for at that point.
Yeah. It could be like, remember the Sidney Jones trade right before 2021 started? It was like a
Mhm.
6th round pick for
Yeah.
Sidney Jones. It could be something like that, I guess. But I mean, it's tough. Like you're talking about a linebacker who's no longer a scheme fit with a coach change. There were a lot of linebackers taken in that range over the last few years. Like you had the Chad Muma, you had the guy who went to Jacksonville, Devin Lloyd. I don't feel like any of those guys would be available for a cheap trade.
You just hit the nail on the head, Brendan, that we've been doing this, Brandy, we've been doing these evaluations the last 3 years heavily on these drafts, and the inside linebacker position has sucked balls as far as the talent level goes. And I'm talking, Randall, not first round, second round, third round. Those 3 rounds all together, right, Brendan? Where you look at it and we've got like a collection of a couple guys this last year's draft. Nobody, I believe, went in the first round as a middle linebacker. Then you had a couple of guys there in the second and third round. And so that's the issue here, I think, as much with the position, is that it's not just the reason, Seattle having a bit of a light. It's I think a bit of a league-wide issue in having really good quality guys that you can rely upon there. It's just kind of they're not coming out. It's tight end. It's like safety. You look through all these draft classes and you come out the other side of it and you're like, man, it's another underwhelming group coming out here. Guys that aren't running fast, that don't have a great physical profile. In the linebackers case, Brendan, these guys will be 225 with short arms, or like Peyton Wilson. It's got no ACL, still taken in the third round.
Right.
Literally no ACL. That guy's the best of the bunch, because there's so few that are that good on what he showed on tape. They're like, yeah, okay, no ACL, we'll still draft him just because we need somebody and there's nobody else here at this point to go get.
Right. And I think that's why you're seeing the position become devalued and deprioritized, because there isn't enough talent out there to even consider making it a high priority position.
Yeah. I did look through, Randall, after we were talking last stream on this, about looking through some linebacker spots across the league that might be kind of open in that way. And I just kept coming back around again and again to the fact that it's very much, everybody's dealing with very thin linebacker crews right now on the inside. Inside linebackers right now it's just very dearthy as far as a position goes. Mm-hmm. Hopefully Tyrese Knight's ready. That's what we're trying to say here, Randy. Let's go, right. Tyrese Knight.
Yeah, just or do what the Chiefs did. Just go get like a Nick Bolton in the 4th round, and he's pretty okay, right? He's all right, yeah. And it's enough for them to win 2 Super Bowls with.
That's true. Though they have hammered it pretty good in other places too, with some of the other inside linebackers they brought in there, right? Because they went and got that other the kid out of Wisconsin, I think it was, they drafted a couple years ago.
Leo
Chanel.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, they got Chanel, and then they had the other kid already in there on top of it. So it's good news, though, if it's a trade deadline deal. The Baltimore Ravens a couple of years ago needed to go out there and get an inside linebacker midway through the year. They had a big hole there where Queen couldn't play in middle linebackers. They bumped Queen to Will, and they went and got Roquan Smith for a 2nd rounder. So that's also where this comes in, Randall, where I think it's much less likely to be a before the season thing, and much more that if they get to a trade deadline and it's still thin, Baker can't stay healthy, Dodson can't stay healthy, Tyrese Knight isn't ready to help, then you go and make that move at that time to go and see if you can find somebody, if you can. But it's going to be hard. Looking around the league, it is a very thin position.
Right.
Randall with another $2 donation. And Randall, thank you for all of your support tonight, man. I salute you, brother. You are awesome as ever. He says, and we had mentioned this guy, but this is probably one guy we should have mentioned, is something that we're looking for in this preseason and we'll be watching very closely. And he says, I'll be watching how Sam Howell looks in the preseason. It's been a rough preseason for Sam Howell before we've gotten to these games, Brendan.
Yeah, it's been very inconsistent, been very up and down.
Yeah,
the accuracy issues I've seen. I mean, Bobo made his Superman catch on a Sam Howell throw, and it's a great catch, but it's also not a great throw if he has to Superman it to get it, right?
Well, better that than put it on the body. That's my thing with it, is I always like him to at least put it to where the guy can go out there and get underneath it, rather than letting the defender catch back up and come make a play on the ball, which sometimes is the other side. Where, if they got to pick a side of the coin, I'll go to the other side of it. But he's not looked good, Brendan. I went there for 2 days in practice, and when I tell you it was brutal to watch, it was brutal. He got better since then. The reports are that he's got a little bit better, and he's going to get a lot of run, I think, Brendan. I think they're going to play him, a lot, because they want this guy to fit into being a guy that can be a solid, at least number 2 for him over the next 2 years, if not get beyond that. Versus Walker, who I don't think there's a long term here for him. He'll be the 3rd guy. Don't get me wrong there, but they want Sam to improve, and the only way you're going to get that is reps. So hopefully he can look a lot better. Hopefully he's a gamer. That's what some people will say in my chat, Brendan. He's a gamer, He just has to have the live fire. He's got to have those bullets zizzing by his head to be fully locked in. So hopefully that is the case, because the kid is talented. Just it's been a bit of a rough ride this preseason, man.
Yeah, we'll see him a lot tomorrow, or excuse me, Saturday, because there's no Geno, so he should play a lot.
Yeah, I would estimate at least 2.5 quarters. You're going to see Sam Howell tomorrow on Saturday, and that's give us a nice, good close-up look, and hopefully he can look a bit better out there with the number ones for as much time as they might get a run in this game. Though they do have that inter squad game coming up, so I think the ones will get a probably pretty short run here, as they're going to want to get some of that in with the Titans inter squad thing coming up next week. I think that's right, Brendan? It's next week.
Yeah, that sounds right.
On the squad. Thank you, there, Randall. Upo with a $5 donation. Thank you, Upo. Appreciate you. It's good to see you too, brother. It says, our off-ball linebackers scare me. They're not bad, but we're real thin there. Just as we're talking about with this, you have your two starters who both were injured coming to camp. They got healthy. Baker's back to being injured. Tyrese Knight looked very raw coming out of his tape with UTEP. John Radigan is John Radigan. You're thin there. There's no doubt about that. And we need Dotson and Baker to basically play this year and be on that field pretty much all the time with how we set this up. So as Randall's touching on his Dono Upo and you're touching on is it, Brennan? Is it the most problematic position currently on the team now that we got the center position?
I'm still really worried about the left guard spot, honestly, but I could see it this way. Yeah. I mean, we couldn't fix everything in one off season. And if you're going to pick one place to not address, I think off-ball linebacker is a pretty good one. But, this is something we've been kind of kicking down the road for a while. We've had 3 straight drafts where I've thought maybe this is the year we invest something in an inside linebacker. And I mean, I know Knight, but that's a day 3 pick. And that's a guy who you knew was raw. He's not ready yet. And everybody knows it. So if we end up losing a couple games that we should have won this year because we have bad inside linebacker play, I think the team's willing to live with that a little bit, but that doesn't change the fact that it could happen, and it would be too bad if it did.
As Brendan says, there's only so much you can address in one offseason, Upo, and we hammered a lot of different items, including really rebuilding the trenches, I feel like, over the past 2 years, which you're going to say, like Brendan says, go light to go get this thing fixed on either side of it, where you're doing not this, but this. I'm okay with them making that choice of going the other direction rather than souping up the linebackers. I think this is also related back to, not to sound like an echo chamber or a repeater here, but that this relates back to the talent that comes out of recent drafts. The last 3-4 years of drafts have not been strong on inside linebacker. When you're saying what are the top positional groups in any given draft, you're not in the top 5 coming to linebacker. You're going maybe quarterback, receiver, running back. You're going to those kind of positions, but you're not arriving at inside linebacker corner. You're not there at that spot. So what should John do during that time? Should he have, reached for guys and gone an extra round over to get a guy that you wanted to pick in to bring him in to set that up? Or do you got to sometimes trust your board, and that's going to leave you in a spot where you might have a position a little bit lighter as long as you're trusting the board? It's the inverse of going by the value-based mindset to where you build up a position super strong. Right, Brendan? Like you got Byron Murphy looking at you on your draft board number 1, but you already have Williams. You already have Draymond Jones. It's not a need. Well, that's the good part where it stacks one particular position up. There's also the inverse to this, though, that if you don't operate off of need in a draft, you might find yourself with a positional group that gets a little bit lean because the value was not there on the board to take them.
Yeah, and I think following that value, even if it occasionally hair lips you a little bit, is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you can deal with this inside linebacker. It's one, you can go find somebody, I think, if you're willing to give up the assets to do it, if it becomes that much of a need. And then the number 2 part is I think that can fit into this defense pretty quickly, as we saw Roquan Smith do, as he went from a Chicago Bear defense that wasn't running what the Ravens were running, and he came in there, and from day 1, that defense was much improved with Roquan in there at the middle linebacker spot.
Absolutely.
So valid concern, Upo. Completely valid concern. Washington Fish Quest. Let me say it right. Thank you for the $2 donation. What is the ceiling of the offensive line this season?
I'm going to say like 14th or 13th best in the league. I'm not going to get ahead of myself here, but I think it'll be good enough to allow the offense to be really good potentially. Like it doesn't need to be the best offensive line in the league. It just needs to be adequate.
It's very true. I think, and this is the ceiling, of course, we're talking about here, Brendan, which is not where they're going to necessarily be, but what could be their best potential if everything works out great. And I think I had this prior to the Connor Williams trade being somewhere around 17, 18. I think Connor takes you more into around the top 10 state of things. I think it's that big of a significant contribution. Having a center that not only is a good center that fits to the scheme, but also can come in as a leader guy to communicate from the center position the way you need, specifically Brendon, with those line protection calls and getting guys in the right, places prior to the snap and getting the scheme protections in the right places prior to the snap. So this has raised it up significantly for me, Washington Quest. But it sounds like, where did you have it prior to the trade, Brendon? Before Connor?
Before the trade, I kind of had it somewhere around like 20th or 21st. I was not too optimistic about it. I did think it was going to be better than last year, just by virtue of the fact that we had a lot of injuries last year. And I did feel like Olu was going to be a little bit better than Evan Brown.
Mm-hmm.
But I still wasn't too high on it. Like we're dealing with this stuff with Abe Lucas all the while. And even in the best case scenario, I can't imagine him playing all 17 games this year. So we're going to be dealing with at least some George Fant. And I mean, George Fant is okay. He's better than Jay Curhan, but not by the massive amount that I think some people perceive him as being. So I wasn't too high on it. So yeah, I think it'll probably be an above average offensive line now in the best case scenario, but I'm not going to go further than that.
It's fair enough. And again, if they are above average, that probably does mean a top 10 offense. That's fair to say, right, Brendon?
Yeah, definitely. Easily. We were a top 10 offense 2 years ago, and I don't think our offensive line was any more than like league average.
Amen. Amen on that. So great question, man. Looking good though. Both me and Brendon have him 6 spots better. We're a little different in spots, but we both have him with that Connor Williams trade, essentially about 6 spots higher than you were going to be. That's how substantial of a move that was in adding that guy to the row to the starting spot here. Hand Grenade with a $2 donation says, are we going to have to rebrand the 13th man now? He's speaking of that, Brendon, because when you play a Mike Macdonald defense, it's like you've got 12 defenders on the football field. So he's thinking, well, have to call him the 13th man now, because that's how we're going to be known, as the 12th man defense out there in the way they structures it. Might just have to, Hand Grenade. I'm going to get the shirt made up here. The 13th man, a new era.
I mean, 13 is not a good number, though. That you're getting into some pretty risky territory there, right?
That's true. Maybe we just got to go 14th man, like they do with the floors on the building, where they skip a floor and they don't have a 13th floor. We'll have to do that. Maybe it's called the 14th man. But I don't know. I'll get the shirts put together at some point, Hand Grenade. I can always do that, man. 13th man, the 14th man. 14th man, a little more better than 13th man. It's got a better ring to it, too. I'll bet as well. Long Live the King with another $2 donation. Thank you, Long Live the King, for the double dip dono. Says, I'm hearing we possibly have 2 lockdown corners.
I mean, we kind of did last year. As much as Woolen did have issues last year, he was still really good with his coverage numbers. And I mean, Witherspoon, for as much as he got targeted, really didn't give up that much at all. So I'm going to say, yeah, I think we do.
Yes. And part of this too is a little bit of the Tariq Woolen coming into this camp looking like he is, steal your wording here, a little locked in, that he is looking like he's coming into year 3 and understanding what's at stake and what he needed to work on and how he needed to come in from a mentality standpoint. Everything we're hearing about him and DK Metcalf in training camp is that those guys are locking horns and in a good way. And in a way of, I'd hate the iron sharpens iron thing because it gets overused so much, but in that kind of way. And that's only going to make those guys better, dealing with the best of the best on the other side of them. And I'm expecting from him a really big year. It's a contract year. He goes out and balls out. He can go get a big time contract extension and say, hey, I've been consistent at the very least, a cover guy for 3 straight years, top notch in that degree of things. I take the ball away, which is the hardest thing for cornerbacks to do in many ways. Pay me. And so there's a lot at stake here for him to be that good. And Witherspoon just is that good. And Mike Macdonald is driving him like he's a back end roster guy, just trying to make the roster in the mentality of what you feel on top of him, which is him just going, I'm going to take this kid to greatness. I'm going to do what I did with Kyle Hamilton. And as EJ Schneider said on my show from Bootleg Football a month ago, Brendon, I'm going to have Kyle Hamilton on steroids here. That's what this is going to be. And I think that we're going to see this defense really benefit from these 2 guys being locked down like they are, and what that adds to a defense that can take advantage of that. It's one thing to have that to a defense that still stays in soft zone coverage, doesn't play man-based concepts, is still going to allow you to dink and dunk. It's another thing, Brendon, when you tighten everything down around the line of scrimmage, stack fronts, blitzes, trusting those guys out on islands one-on-one. That's when football gets really fun.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a big ask to be better than Kyle Hamilton because he's been really, really good, but it feels like it could happen here. And yeah, I mean, if they were able to be as good as they were in coverage last year on that really bad defense, then on this defense, you should expect them to be much better.
Mm-hmm. Well, this defense is going to lean into the things that they do well. And Devon's, I remember I had that chart where they showed you, these charts you can bring up, and Brendon, you can see where guys are, who was the best man cover corners and who was, not the best in man coverage situations. And Witherspoon and Mullen were right up there at this top mark. You're like, wow, they're up at the good side of the list where you want to be. Both their two names right next to each other. But then you see the snap counts of how often they were actually run in those man-based concepts. And you go, that's the easiest flip for a new coaching staff to come in and do. It's the easiest thing for a coaching staff to say, this guy does this thing really great. The prior defense had him not do those great things at a fairly inoften frequency. Well, why? Because they just didn't, those just weren't in the principles of that defense. Okay, well, we're going to do that. Trey Brown, best press cover cornerback in football last year, Brendon. You run press coverage, you're going to typically run press coverage off of zone. You're not running press coverage to cover 3 looks. So he's the best press cover corner in football according to PFF, but you only run a very small number of his snaps at the end of the day out of true press man cover concepts that he does best. Again, something that's an easy thing for the coaching staff to lean into and is only then going to maximize out the players that much more and allow Macdonald to kind of go crazy with it. Because that's the thing that can hold back this scheme in Macdonald's scheme. Whether you go back to Buddy Ryan, Rex Ryan, or Wink Martindale, if they don't have the cover corners out on the outside that can hold up, their scheme doesn't quite work. Macdonald's found some workarounds on that with his zone coverage concepts, but it's still at the heart of it, wants to have those guys that can hold up on the outside one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm pretty optimistic about that situation right now. That's one part of this team that I feel really good about right now, the corners.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you guys for all of the donations on that. Very, very kind of everyone is always on that side of things. We really appreciate it. We've got this game where I think we've kind of covered the main items we're looking at from a big picture standpoint. It does sound like Justin Herbert's not going to be playing in this game as he's got some injury that he's dealing with. So that's a little bit of notable. So neither starting quarterback will technically be in there. I didn't have that on the thumbnail, but Easton Stick and Sam Howell as a thumbnail, Brendon's not exactly going to bring a lot of eyeballs to the to the show necessarily. But
I mean, there are definitely going to be some Seahawks fans that are going to be more interested to see Howell than Geno because we've seen Geno the last 2 years and haven't seen Howell yet. So I don't know. Maybe that's a little more compelling. Depends on who you ask.
It certainly is for me because I do still, even though he was looking rough in camp, have hope for this kid. He is young. He does have skill and ability. This is a new offense, and he's a little, I think, in over his head here out the gate. But there's still a lot of reason to believe that this guy can still have the ability to kind of figure it out, have the light bulb come on, and become a player that can be a starter in this league. I do still believe that. So you're right. There might be a little bit more intrigue because of that with Sam at the kind of centerpiece of this and the way that this will go. Where do you think the Chargers are going this year? Is this just a feel out year, you think, with Harbaugh, or do you think that this is a season with that team that they can push in that AFC with their talent level?
I don't think they're going to necessarily push. I think they'll take steps in the right direction. They'll feel pretty good about things going into 2025. I don't know. I think that they've got. I don't think you're going to be able to run the ball as much as Harbaugh is going to try to run the ball this year and get away with it on the level of, like Michigan was able to do, or even those Niners teams were able to do back in the Harbaugh days. So I'm going to say it's going to be all right. I think they're going to be pretty decent. They address the offensive line in a really effective way. They've got Joe Alt, Rashawn Slater, and
Zion Johnson.
Yeah, Zion Johnson. But Corey Linsley is retired now. He's out of there. So it's not quite the big, great wall of Los Angeles that they were dreaming about building at one point. And Bosa is going to miss games. Derwin James is going to miss games on defense. So they've got some issues there that may not just go away immediately.
He is inheriting a stronger team, I think, here than you could say maybe he's inherited, I think, at recent stops, that they've got a little more talent than when he walked into San Francisco than they probably did, or when he walked into Stanford they did, or even Michigan. So I think that's the one thing, but I do agree with you. I think this is still probably a year they're going to have to kind of feel their way through and have their up and down, be probably a 7, 8, 9 win type team when it's all said and done, in that, you don't want to face them during the regular season. They're just a pain in the ass matchup. But I, like you, think that he's going to have to grow his passing attack game with this new era. And he's got Herbert to do it, which helps, but the receiving core isn't the greatest, especially since Quentin Johnson doesn't look like he's quite ready to. He's been just every other day I get a clip of him just ball dropping up out of his hands or flopping out or going some other different direction with it.
Yeah, it's not really looking good there. And I mean, we're definitely getting to the point where if it doesn't happen soon, it's probably just not going to happen. Like, you're a receiver. Rookie receivers and young receivers do great things in the NFL every year. It happens all the time. So if you're not able to get on the horse within the first couple years, the league's going to be out on you really quickly.
Route running in hands. It's a lot like I say with quarterback and arm strength, Brendan. If you have struggles coming out of college with route running in hands, it's hard for that to then be something you can really develop going along and through. You've got to kind of have some of that just coming in the gate. And you saw with Quentin on his tape that he ran very unusual routes at TCU. You know, he took his kind of own kind of fortuitous route to make it happen, to get open, and likewise kind of a body catcher, not a guy that's getting his hands out there and really trying to snag it, despite the fact he's kind of a bigger bodied receiver. We'll see how it goes with him, but they need him to be a bit of a game changer out there because the rest of the receiving core is kind of Ladd will be good, but maybe Brandon Rice will be ready. They got Brandon Rice there as well, and he's having a strong camp for them too. So maybe it'll be Ladd McConkey, Brandon Rice, Joshua Palmer combination when it's all said and done out there. Still, I think this will be a good battle for our team, Brendan, because you do have a pretty good quality offensive line that is going to try to run on us. Good first test for us right out of the gate is to see how can we stop the run. We've got a team here out the gate that's going to try to run the ball, and they're going to run those starters at least on that offensive line. And so you're going to get a little test here to see how the new principles with Mike Macdonald's defense on that trench work with our defenders, and especially because we're going to start our starters in addition to that. So something also to kind of watch for in the challenge, I think, that they give you on that side of it. And I like being tested like that defensively in the preseason, because we need to get the tackling. We need to get the toughness. We need to shore that side up, because that's been one of the biggest issues, not just on the defense, but the team over the last couple of years, I'd argue.
Yeah, just general tackling ability is going to be very important to see. Although, obviously, I think the bigger problem the Seahawks have had the last 2 years is they wear down over the course of the season. So just because it looks good early doesn't mean it'll look good later. I think the last 2 years you've seen they get tired at the end of the year and they forget how to tackle. So it's something where even if it starts out good, that doesn't mean the problem is fixed.
Definitely not. And that comes back to getting off the field and less long drives, less extra snaps on the field over the course of the season. That's just another issue to kind of see if they can shore that up as well. Something that does need to be shored up, because another thing that's been a problem for many years going back on that. Big Boy Jess, thank you for the $2 donation. He says, Brendon Nelson was right. We should have drafted Joe Milton.
Yeah, I was pretty excited. We got to see him a little tonight.
Yeah, he's been having a good camp. In addition to that, a lot of people say he might be even ahead of Drake May right now in the performance of those two guys and how they've done throughout training camp. So we'll see if he does come forward in that way. And I didn't mind him as a later round guy. I just didn't want to take him into that earlier mode of things. I didn't like that thought of it.
Yeah, I will. I will say that I think Drake May's starting to turn it on. Apparently, the last few days he's been a lot better. So I'm not. There was some serious talk that he was going to start the season and maybe end up as the backup the whole season. I don't think that's going to happen at this point, but slow start for sure.
And I think that's where people do freak out on these rookie quarterbacks if they don't. I honestly am a believer. I go counter to most, I think, now, because it seems like the no-brainer thing everybody just says is play him. I'm more of a guy of, I don't think it's the worst thing to give a guy a year to sit. I think it's actually kind of benefits the guy to have especially if you can have a true veteran ahead of him that can, he's learning from as he's going through. Where it's really a truly learning experience, not just he's just sitting there. I think it's actually, there's a benefit to that, especially for like a Patriots team this year that's not with Drake May. They're not going to go win any games. That's not a team that's winning that division, much less getting to the playoffs.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think it just depends on the player. Like Andrew Luck was ready to play day one, and having Andrew Luck sit out a year, I don't think would have helped. But somebody like to go into the Wayback Machine here, Christian Ponder, he needed to sit for a year at least.
I can even make the argument. I can even make the argument on Andrew Luck that he should have sat, and not because of the same reasons that you would sit a guy like Drake May. I agree with you. Andrew Luck was ready to roll. The problem was that the Colts offensive line wasn't ready to roll. Why does Andrew Luck end up retiring? Because he gets his body beat to hell. Why does he get his body beat to hell? Because he's playing behind an offensive line that's getting him beat to hell. I mean, the
issue with that is the offensive line just kept getting worse. Like that rookie year, Colts offensive line was no better or worse than any other offensive line they had. So they were never really ready for that. And
Yeah, but that's also
that
the
is a tragedy.
It is a tragedy. It's also a bit of the mismanagement, though, of the way they did that. And it's, this is something, with me, I harp on this a lot, where teams just go get the quarterback and then they don't have any plan in place. And then they become shocked when the thing doesn't work right. They become shocked when Andrew Luck has to retire early. It's like, well, what you needed to do is then make it a point of emphasis and a sense of urgency then to go get that offensive line fixed quickly, right? Not do we'll go 4 or 5 years and organically go get Ryan Kelly. And then we'll wait another draft and we'll go eventually go get another Quentin. No, get it built up now. Because in that time of you building the line up to when it was finally good, the 4 years it took of Andrew Luck's career for you to finally get it right, his body was done. So that's my thing with it, is it's like, don't put your guy in peril. Don't put him up to fail. And they did that because they wanted to push out there and just throw it to the wind. We'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you saw what happened and it didn't work out. It's a failed experience at that point. It should be, if anything, to me, a little bit of one of those things that's a lesson for teams to learn, but they don't. You still have teams, and I still think with the Patriots, you'll see it with them. They'll throw them out there again this year and it'll be like, here you go, Rook, toss them out. And it's like, I don't know if that's the best thing for him.
Yeah, it's situational again. Like, the Patriots offensive line is no good, right? Like I don't know what they did to it this offseason, but it's no good, right? Like, whereas I guess the Bears also is not that good because they lost Whitehair. So Caleb doesn't necessarily need an offensive line though with the way he plays. So we'll see how that works. I think that could be a lot of fun, honestly.
And they've got Tevin Jenkins there, they got a couple guys in the Bears. You're right. It's not necessarily some huge strength, but it's stronger than it's been. And it is stronger than what the Patriots are bringing. Cause of course, Patriots are dealing with the years of bad Belichickian drafts. And that line is slowly, but surely kind of bled out town. Guys have gotten older. Joe Thuney types signed to Kansas City in free agency, and they haven't been able to re-enlist through there. Remember they took that one kid in the second round a couple of years ago out of that small school that was supposed to be a center, and he's a guard for them now.
Cole Strange.
Yeah.
I remember that.
Kind of weird. Upo, thank you for the $10 donation, Upo. I appreciate you for that. He says, Brandon, please describe to us what you saw with Sam Howell in person. What were the issues? There was a few of them. First issue up, I would say, is processing. He's not sure of what he's seeing prior to the snap versus what he's seeing post-snap. You're seeing a lot of him dropping back in the pocket, head goes over here, and then he's sort of staring something down, and then head whips back over here, and then there's some panic type throw, or leading to the second issue, bailing out on a pocket if he's not sure of what he's seeing. Not necessarily because of pressure, but because of he's like, I thought that was going to be there, and then that guy was there, and Mike Macdonald's defense is giving him a lot of troubles on that. So the leaving the pocket thing just without reason, and this trails back to him with Washington last year, where sometimes there would be clean pockets where you just suddenly, I want to go to the scramble mode. And this isn't just a problem. This is with you young quarterbacks that have mobility. This is something that they have a tendency to do, right? So it's not a shocker with that. But it was an issue you were seeing over and over again, where he just was never sure about where to quite go with the ball. A lot of bailing on the pocket. When he was sure of where he wanted to go with the ball, a lot of errant throws. There was one throw that he threw to Derek Young down the sideline where it was 10 feet over his head out of bounds. And there was a couple of those where it was really bad on the accuracy front of it, where it was just wildly off, not even in the vicinity of it. There was one where he's in the red zone. They're running a red zone drill. He's rolling to his left. The play's running late. He throws back across his body into the middle of the field in the back of the end zone and gets it intercepted. He's got another play where he does that thing where he rolls out, like I said, where he prematurely rolls out, pirouettes, does the Russell Wilson pirouette move, right? Leaves the pocket too early. He's running out along the side, throw the ball away. There's nobody to throw to. He kind of haphazardly throws it, and the defender catches it, and they can't get their feet quite down. But it was a completely unnecessary type of throw to make in that moment there when you're rolling that left. Just dirt it, go live a play another day. What were you doing there? And so just everything's just a little bit off. Nothing's comfortable. Nothing's on point. And meanwhile, you're watching Geno and he's back there like a freaking Terminator, throwing with anticipation, timing, everything's on point. So it made it look even worse, I think, from Hal's perspective than when you saw the gulf between the two guys. But he has gotten better since my days were there. By all reports, people were like, he's a bit better today. He's a bit better. Because those same people that were with me watching, that were reporters, were saying the same thing I was saying on those days of like, this is god awful. This is horrible. And those same guys have started to say, okay, it is looking a little bit better now as we go along, which new system, new scheme. You might look rough at first. Maybe that's not the most surprising of things, Upo.
Yeah, it's easy to forget how young he is because he's
Yeah.
been in the league 2 years, but he's younger than some of the rookie quarterbacks in the league this year.
Great
So,
point.
not
Great
shocking.
point. Yeah. I'm not in any way, and when I'm saying about him and saying that this is him as a guy that we got to take off the list of any potential for a long term here, or that he can't even be a vibrant backup for us. Not that at all. It's just where he is currently in that progression of onboarding this offense, and that there's just a ways to go. And hopefully they give him a lot of run in this preseason because he could use it. And that we see that same thing. Maybe he just, if it starts out rough, we see some improvement as he goes on through this preseason with the run that he does get.
Right. Sounds good to me.
Thank you, though, Upo, for the double dip donation tonight, man. I appreciate all of your guys' support, and many of you guys 1, 2, 3, 4 donations on top of that during the show tonight. So thank you guys for that. It's really, really, really appreciated. If you guys can for us, of course. If you're on my side here, watching on the Hawks Nest side, please do subscribe up over to Seahawks Brendon Nelson here on YouTube. And if you're on Seahawks Brendon Nelson's side, please do subscribe up to the Hawks Nest on YouTube. We're going to be doing this as a weekly show here, doing the preview show throughout this year. And we'll be doing some special shows in addition to that, kind of more conceptual based here a little bit this year when we do some kind of offshoot shows on that side of it. When it comes to this preseason, I think we've covered on this matchup a lot of what we're going to be looking at here in this game.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything that we might have covered, or any last little things that you look at in this game that you're looking for or going to stand out to you?
I think we did a pretty good job of covering it. Maybe Myers, because I guess Myers didn't look so good in camp so far, which, I mean, you know, if you can't come through for us this year, then you're not coming through for us any year, right?
He costs a lot of money to be if he's in a middling state, and so he needs to be good this year. You're right. We're supposed to have a good year this year. He's Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde over a 10-year career, and you can time it on a stopwatch. So stopwatch time this year is supposed to be good, Jason Myers, and yeah, hopefully we see that he is he's locked in and going well, because it's the part of the team that we don't talk about, Brendan. But of course, if he is locked in and going well, you know what you get in Dixon. You have potentially 2 barn burner returners in Laviska and Eskridge. You really could be having a difference-making career on that special team side of it. And that has been, in the last couple of years, mostly one of our most consistent parts of our team, which definitely helps you in winning and losing football games.
Yeah, absolutely. I think special teams you can definitely point to special teams as something that cost us games last year. So
that's right.
And like I've said before, this year with the new kickoff rules, I think it's going to be even more emphatic.
Yeah. I agree. And we look like we've gotten ahead of that in Eskridge and Laviska, you got guys that it's sample size. They didn't have 45 returns last year, but those are 2 of your top 3 kick returners last year in the league, for whatever that's worth. So, you know, you have kind of maybe set the stage for this as far as Schneider to take advantage of this new rule, but that'll be the fun part of preseason here to see if that, you know, does indeed kind of play out, you know, in that way. Brendan, I thank you for jumping on in here. We will be back here a minimum at least next week on the preview show. But we'll just kind of be surprised you guys maybe some quick shows on some quick topics and stuff like that. I'm gonna talk with Brendan offline on that kind of stuff with it.
Yeah.
But Brendan, I'm looking forward to doing this again with you this year. You know, we've got a lot of optimism to be with this team right now. And you and I have had to cover some times in recent years, some tough football to watch, and some times where we haven't been able to be always optimistic. And I just want to say it is nice being able to go into this year with a sense of we don't know what's going to happen, that there's a sense of true potential in this team, true upside in this team. I think we've always been kind of hopeful for that in recent years, but we've been hopeful on the back of change being undertaken that then was never undertaken. We know the change has been undertaken here in a major way. And boy, I've got some big time optimism for this team, not both just this year, but into the future.
Yeah, if you're not optimistic right now, I don't know what it's going to take for you to be optimistic, but things are happening.
They are indeed. And maybe this team can surprise all the national pundits, Brendan. Everyone's putting us in the back end of things, but you never know, man. Maybe they come out and shock the world a little bit. That'd be an awesome thing to see too, on top of everything else. So we'll be here every step of the way, folks. We'll be tracking it, monitoring it. We'll be breaking it down for you guys. I really appreciate you guys watching tonight. Had a great turnout. Please do hit that like button, get subbed up on both sides. We'll be back shortly. Hopefully we'll be reporting on a little bit of a win here for your Seahawks to start the season off right and true. But until that time, please, by God, do not you ever forget. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.